We've said members joining.
I'll let me know whenever. So, so.
Online, sorry.
This the, okay, sorry.
This side is up, first.
The. You reported it, Sam.
Whenever you guys are ready, after that.
Yeah.
I ran into my brother.
I don't know why I offered to say it when I actually had the very thing.
Okay.
Where'd you go? I think we have.
Hey, Jim,
Yes.
do you want to ask a question under new business? To change the agenda for the public meeting?
Oh.
Yeah. So that way you don't, we don't have to.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
There's something wrong with the echo, it's not you walking, the echo is the echo.
Yes, so.
There's a hill going. Well, you were saying.
oh, sorry, I just, I'm slow tired.
I've been,
Turn over.
For.
He says, girl, turn it over, that's okay.
Okay.
This is.
If you're drinking those.
Yeah,
I wasn't
we've
expecting-
got a lot of items of business this
It's
evening.
a lot happening.
Everybody else. Wow.
It might be.
I don't know.
So has, Representative Thompson.
I'm Shane, who's
Okay.
Maintain. Waiting. And Anna's on her way.
I mean, we have 5 members, we have everyone, Alistair, Robert, Aaron, Joy. Benson, that's more than 5. Is
Yes, it started.
it on, is the stream?
Good afternoon. It is now 5:03 on June 4th, 2025. And this District of Columbia State Board of Education working session is now called to order. The working session is being streamed live on the State Board's YouTube page for members of the public to view. The roll will now be called to determine the presence of a quorum. Senator Butler, will you now call the roll?
Representative Barnes. Representative Lynn. Representative Mayor. Representative Ting,
Present.
Representative Best,
present.
Representative Chang,
Present.
Representative Colson. Representative Goulet.
Here.
Representative Henderson,
Present.
Representative Johnson Law,
Good evening and present.
Representative Thompson,
Present.
Representative Williams. Representative Patterson,
President.
President of the Forum.
A quorum has been determined and the State Board will now proceed with. At this particular time, I will give the leadership report. I will post it online, but for the members that are here in person and not virtual, I've given a copy to each person. So I'll make sure that the members that are virtual, get that and I'll get that out to you. But I'll just do the highlights really quickly. It's 2 pages. There's a lot of things that kind of happened, but some of them are dated at this particular time. We met with the chairman on May 1st. And basically at that particular time, we were right before the budget and everything like that. So a lot of this stuff has transpired. since the time that we met him on May first, okay? We did talk about the, cell phone, bill that was coming through. We talked about the charter, and when we say charter, the PCSD, board training, both were being marked up for May, 13th at that particular time. We gave him updates on resolutions that were coming through, talking about the Public Charter School Athletic Association, resolution, and also let students attend kindergarten emergency declarations. We talked in length about that as well. We also talked about the priorities at that particular time. I know we've received the mayor's, budget, and we've talked about it. We've had our testimonies, but we did kind of talk about his priorities. And at that particular time, what he basically said, no new initiatives, and keeping schools basically stable was what was going to be his priority after he received the budget. And then, Director Butler gave a very thorough update on, the office and its construction. On May 11th, we met with Ossie, and again, for those who have the notes and everything like that, and again, I apologize to those online. There are quite a few things on here, and I'll just highlight those, for you guys. You guys can read them. But we talked about the literacy investments, for the 2026 budget. We talked about, a little bit about impact and ESSER funding, this liquidation. We also talked about, community grants, and FY 26 and the budget and advocacy for those. And we also talked about the math work group update. They keep going. We also gave, superintendent a kind of like an update when we were about to have the meeting on homelessness, that the panel was going to be on homelessness, and we discussed that. And then we also talked to her again about the, Aussie graduation requirements and response document. So, again, pretty thorough, so you can see the responses. I want to thank Jen for all the comprehensive notes that she takes, because that's what I basically, cut and paste from is her notes, so thank you. We also, the leadership, myself and the vice president, we attended, a state board staff meeting on the 28th. What I will say is that thank you first and foremost to the staff for inviting us for that time to come in and kind of just hear from you, to talk about the temperature basically of everything that's going on, where you guys would like to see a little bit more clarity from the board and board members and how we respond. So I really appreciate you guys, inviting us to your staff meeting. So that was one of the other things. Just recently, last week, we had budget hearing testimony. Again, I want to thank both the admin committee first and foremost, that Representative Williams, chairs, because what came out of that meeting made the testimony that I gave so much better, clearer, and allowed me to really focus on the things that we really need to hit on. And I really want to shout out Director Butler, for her just thorough overview to the chairman about 3%, COLA request. I think because of her and her testimony and, just answering questions, it made a favorable impact, is what I'll say. Most of the questions revolved around that after we said it, and I just want to thank her for just coming in and being able to quote line items and benefits and everything. I just appreciate you, so thank you so much for that. And last but not least, I want to re-emphasize parliamentary training. I know this is not a compliance issue or anything like that, but if we could, everyone could go in and take the training that is offered to us, and I believe that's offered to better. It would be great if we could. I think that would make us more effective, more efficient, and make our meetings run a little bit better. Or we wouldn't have to be asking questions like, can you do this? Do you have to do this? I know that's me sometimes, but just if we could do that, that would be great. Are there any questions concerning the leadership report? I'm not seeing any or hearing any from the members, so I'm now going to turn to executive.
I don't have a question. I'm sorry, and I'm moving a little slow today. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I just have a really bad headache. But at the May working session, and I've made this request a couple times, but I know I made it at the May working session. that as we have meetings with the chairman and as we correspond with his office, if we could share what hearing dates that are coming up in advance of those hearings so that we can provide board testimony. For example, Councilmember Pinto's markup, which I also believe the council already voted on that legislation around the cell phones passed. But just being able to say, hey, these are things that the board has a opinion on in case there are members who are trying to follow all the different things. It's really helpful and important just to follow up on all the things we pass and the work that we do. And so I'm going to ask again that we get as the board, when hearing dates are happening that are things that we have expressed a specific board opinion on.
Thank you so much, Representative Thompson, and we will heed your call, that we will heed it, is what I'll say, because you shouldn't have to emphasize it. That's what I'm trying to say. So yes, we'll do that now. Now we will turn to Executive Director Butler for her report.
Good evening, members of the DC State Board of Education. Since the last working session, our waivers of spending and hiring have been approved by the Executive Office of the Mayor. As a result, earlier this week, we're pleased to welcome Haley Steve down towards the end of the table as our new policy analyst and staff, and Masura Irabat as our new admins and operations fellow. We have not filled the admin support specialist position yet. Both of these new hires significantly enhance the capacity and expertise of our small but mighty team. I also want to congratulate Muriel Cooper, our HR specialist, on completing her mental health first aid certification for our team. We're glad to have someone on staff with those abilities and capacities also. And additionally, I was able to represent the state board at the Bigfoot National Youth Summit and at the NASB Early Childhood Education Network convening, both that were held here in DC. NASB was earlier this week. In preparation for SBOE's budget oversight hearing, our team and I prepared and submitted testimony to the committee of the whole and responded to follow-up questions via email after the hearing. Our budget and operations team is in the final phase of testing a new electronic key card purchase request system. We hope to launch it agency-wide by the end of the fall. Members, this is a reminder that your financial disclosures were due May 15th. And if you have not completed them and sent of your completion to Muriel, she should have sent you a reminder email.
Oh, it's.
Because she has to make a report for our agency. So if you have not sent that proof, please log back in, download said form, says you completed it, and send it to her. Oh, this month we also held 2 meetings, one of which was our initial design meeting with DGS and the contractor for our office. Things are looking up and they're exciting. They've been designed, I think it's going to be fabulous. The project is slated to be completed at the end of November 2025. A complete project briefing will be shared at next month's working session, and it will include details on our move to space, including a working session. Next, if you have any items for board leadership's upcoming meetings with the state superintendent, DME, or Chairman Mendelson, please send them to me by noon on Monday, June 9th, 2025. Lastly, please join me in wishing Jim Briones the happiest of all birthdays. He is our team, and we are always excited. Are there any questions?
Hi, Director Butler.
I'm gonna do Representative Johnson Law real quick, because I saw a hand, and then I'll get right to you, Representative Check.
Director Butler, should we sing now or do you want us to sing after?
Oh, please.
Yes.
That's later.
During the break. Okay. Thank you. During the break.
Tomorrow's her actual birthday, but she's not here.
Representative Che.
My questions are way less fun than LaJoy's, unfortunately. But first a tactical one. What was the ask about the chairman?
if you have any agenda items, to send them to me Monday, by noon on
Got it.
Monday. Alright.
Great, thank you. And with the staffing that we have, what are the things that we as a office are unable to do or are short on capacity to do for the foreseeable kind of short-term future?
Well, for the short-term future, without our admin support specialist, that is the person who's really the lead on all of our hybrid meeting capabilities, but also that is one of the purchasers, like key card holders for our agency. So when you're down to one across all 3 offices, it slows down what could be, because you only have one person doing all of those things. But that is also because we are onboarding all the other people. That person has had a key role in the onboarding process of getting badges, security, computers and phones. And so we are now trying to, other people take on those responsibilities in there, while with that vacancy. So some of it's taken a little bit longer, but I think as it pertains to the board, is mostly as regards to the hybrid capacity of the meetings. The person in this position also usually runs our hour. Oh, thank you.
Okay, so there's not much, is there anything that you would like us to change in the way that we engage with the staff right now?
No, but I don't think that position had as direct access, there's like as much access with you all, engagement, excuse me, not access with you all, as, let's say, our policy analyst will or something like that, now that they're on board. I think if you still have an operations or budget question, you will come to me.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? All right,
What was Emily's email again? You said to send it to Emily, who were sending this bacon proof to?
I don't know anyone that can really.
oh, good.
My hearing is going, so that may be another question. Muriel. not Emily.
Our HR person.
Yeah, you should have an email in your inbox from Muriel.
There it is, right there.
Then send that. Respond to that.
That was Representative Lay, great work.
Yes, and that he took his financial disclosure statement on time filed it, so that's why.
Because she has to submit a report to Vega that shows very compliant, but she doesn't say that she completed it, then they were gonna start reaching out to you.
Yeah.
You read it now.
Individual. Again, thank you, Director Butler, for your report, and welcome to the new members to our staff. I'm happy about that the way that you navigated that. And also, I just want to say that, hanging out with Director Butler at meetings or conferences is really cool. For the simple fact that she asks great questions and everybody gives her major props. So I went to the NASB thing, and I think every time we went through a particular panel, everybody looked at you and basically it's like, okay, so what does she got? Or, so I just want to compliment you on that. It's really cool to hang out with you at conferences. Thank you. The next portion of our meeting will be spent on student advisory committee updates. First, our student representatives will present their student advisory committee and a report. After that, our own Dr. Fleischer will provide updates on the application process for the next year's student representative. Turn it over to you guys now.
Yeah, so this year, one of the main things that we did throughout the year was compiling recommendations from the student advisory committee in the form of an annual report, which is the combination of debrief of everything that we've done this year, debrief of all of the meetings that we've had, including many photos, which are my favorite part, mission statements that we wrote. We can go to what the report that slide. That might be good. Then we follow. Yeah, okay. An example of some pictures.
No, I'm not doing the slide.
Oh, next slide. Who's doing this? Sorry. Next slide. Thank you. Yeah, so this year, the SAC was a great space for, I believe we had over 90 students signed up. I think our peak meeting was around, I want to say around 50 attendees. So many different voices from many different schools from across the city. And we all convened and talked about education issues. This report summarizes what we discussed. We highlighted some of the main problems that students agreed were plaguing their schools to the greatest extent, and then thinking about what are recommendations for solutions and ways that the board can approach solving those issues in the future. We also looked at our main accomplishments and the main things that we got done in our meetings. The categories that we discussed there are bulleted. We had a group discussing college, career, and life readiness, which coincides with the committee, the Adult State Board Committee. We had a group discussing curriculum and knowledge, financial literacy, teacher evaluations, and also mental health. I am very proud of this report. I would like to thank Dr. Fleischer, especially for the work that you put into this and the other student representatives. I think that it is a very good demonstration of everything that we were able to accomplish this year, and we would appreciate if you took some time to read it.
Yes, everyone should have a full copy of the report and the material. But I think, you know. I didn't know. if
The
they
next-
had
the next
full
That's
copy.
good.
And then just to break down what's inside of the report. So we have an introduction, just very simple, like what the SEC is about for the public. Then we have our summaries. So for future records, if anyone wants to go back, if any member of the public wants to see what the SEC was like and how to improve, just that kind of thing. The meat and potatoes is kind of like, at least subjectively from my perspective, are the education issues and recommendations. So what we did is we had all the SEC members over like a few months brainstorm in small groups, like all these different topics, think about issues and then think about the recommendations. I think the value is that, like, one, that you're able to like see what like they generally like are concerned with, but two, you have such a diversity of ideas that could be really worth exploring. We also have our acknowledgements, and then we have a bunch of raw data from survey responses that we conducted every meeting using Mentimeter. And thank you to Dr. Fleischer and everybody for basically, like, you can really see not just like a summarized version, but their raw words with all their misspellings and all their slang. Like, yeah.
This is an amazing photo.
Thank you, that is my.
I love that photo.
I'm
It's
so
like,
glad.
this is like so cool.
Yes.
And I just want, I think, I'm gonna answer the question.
We're happy to take any,
Yeah, there's
If-
next line is questions.
yeah. Any questions, comments, concerns, we would love to address.
I think first and foremost, everybody just loves your picture. I think that's what we were waiting for.
Very glad to hear that.
I'm a little jealous, but I really like that hoodie.
Oh, I have mine today, actually, yeah.
Yeah, Munchkin did find that.
I think there's another picture that shows the design in fact. It was actually designed by Nancy. She designed the artwork on the back. Yeah, it's not in this picture, but it's on like, in the table on this page. So that is an original SAC design. I think for me, what really stood out were your 5 areas. Aside from media, like your area, your education issues and recommendations, where you decided to put forth solutions. I'm a big fan, you know, not always good to complain, it's always good to say. So we'll get that in 5 areas. So college, career, and life readiness, curriculum and knowledge, financial literacy, impact and future evaluations, and mental health. And so I think that it would be really great, particularly for members, that you all are thinking about, you know, what students want. You have heard from students about what their suggestions could be, recommendations in these 5 areas. It may be helpful to, when possible, try to incorporate that with the ongoing work, because this set of 3 of these students will definitely be going off to university in the fall, and so they won't physically be here, but to have this as something to refer back to and to even lead to the next set of student representatives, I think is a good body of work. So thank you.
Other comments, questions? Senator Goulet?
I mean, it's just incredible. I was lucky to be able to participate in a lot of these meetings and, I mean, the feedback and engagement, if you look year to year, there was nothing wrong with SAC last year. It was really great, but I mean, this year was a whole nother level, and I can't wait. I have not read the report yet. I can't wait to read it, and just so impressive. And it's so easy now to sell SAC to other youth, because you can say honestly, this was an incredible group of youth who came up with solutions themselves. And, I mean, it was just phenomenal. So congrats to y'all. I can't wait to read the report. Uh, I know you're gonna go be successful and I gotta get this photo autographed so that ours that, you know, are doing all amazing things. I can say I have it autographed. Great job.
Were there other questions or comments?
I would like to add, we put this in the report, but thank you to all the members who visited SAC meetings, especially Representative Goulet, who I think set a record for coming to, you came to like 5 SAC meetings this year.
I'm gonna try to make it to all of them next year. Yeah, sure. Usually pretty nice to me, but occasionally I vote my stuff down, you know?
Yeah, cell phones. And without fail, jumped over the table into the middle of the little divide here at every single meeting, and we all appreciate it.
And next year I'm gonna do it just hurtling the table into the center without touching it at all. So that's,
Good luck.
I'm gonna get in shape for that. So we'll be ready.
I'll get next year's student representatives to take a video.
That'll be great. We'll do it.
Any other questions or comments? Representative Goulet, I'm going to take your positive comments about, you know, how we continue to improve and transition to Dr. Fleischer, because he is the person that makes that happen and that constant improvement. I'm gonna give him his props and it's your time, sir.
Okay, no, thank you all. And
And
just,
we have a comment. Representative Thompson says a huge shout out to the students and Dr. Fleischer. It is both a mix of them and of them taking the initiative and the systems Dr. Fleischer put in place to elevate their voices.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Thompson.
well, y'all made it easy, and, speaking of making it easy, you go
Next slide.
to the next slide. But I do appreciate all members coming to the meetings and the student reps, you made it very easy this year. So for next steps, we do have the next school year's student representatives. And so if you go to the next slide, please, this is the same timeline you saw last month, but I'm gonna focus on the June 23rd date. You all are going to receive, and in your folders, you should have this student A example application. We've had about 12 students apply for the student representative positions so far. This year's form is a little bit different. I wanted to get an idea of their leadership skills, organizational skills, ability to come to as many meetings as possible. I also set it up for like leadership skill, their interest and confidence in serving as student representatives and lifting up the voices of their SNC members and the students across DC. And so what I need all of your help with is starting June 23rd, you'll get a PDF with everyone, it's something similar to this. It'll say student A, their responses on the form. The next page will be student B, so on and so forth. So again, so far we have 12 students who applied to score these. Last year, there was like a Word document and there was a little bit of confusion, like a few members provided actual feedback for improving that. So this year, I'm just going to have it on an Excel sheet. And you'll see an example of that, the picture on the left. Each member will have a tab. There'll be a drop down and you can put up to 5 points for different categories. So that would be just based on their availability. If they say they can make it to all the meetings, then you give them a higher score. Leadership skills, interest in serving as student representatives, so on and so forth. Some things I'd like to really point out though, is please, for each student member, share your notes, because it might come down to more than 4. And so that would help the staff really decide on those 4. So you'll have until July 15th to score these. So between June 23rd, July 15th, the more members, the better. Another feedback that we got from you all is to take out the names and the wards so that we eliminate some of that bias. Another thing I would mention is before scoring student A, skim through some of the applications, just get an idea of what all of them are sharing and filling out, and then start with student A, then student B, student C, and so on. If there's more than 26 students, I'll get rid of the letters and I'll just do student 1, student 2, student 3. Other points are, I think that's about it. The only other points I'll make is if there's a student that really stood out in the notes, be like, I really want this student representative. Again, that would help us finalize. That's it for applications. I have one other announcement around student, the SAC, but I'll hold for questions for the applications. Anybody have any? Yes.
And this is just some feedback and probably not to be implemented this year because that might cause confusion. But next year, maybe also have an optional section for a completely optional letter, recommendation letter, specifically from a teacher advisor of a club you've been in, so we can gauge how much you participate in a club. Because it's important to, because like I can say that I showed up to like all the meetings of math club, but asking Mr. Moncall, my math club advisor, might have a better like gauge.
Yeah. Okay.
So Ryan. I'm gonna lean away from the letters of recommendation, because there may be young people who cannot get a letter of recommendation, and this is an opportunity for them to serve. And I also want to think of our student representatives as a development opportunity. Because maybe they haven't had, maybe math club or organized club before haven't been their thing, but they learned about this and they want to give it a try. And maybe they wrote really great questions that the members scored really high. I think there's an opportunity. I think there's value in giving them the opportunity, but also value in whatever reason, if that young person gets into it is too much, that we have alternates lined up who can step in, who've also been through the orientation. Because I feel like every kid doesn't have a list of people that take that recommendation. And we don't want to create another barrier to entry for an opportunity.
Representative Boulay.
This is just an idea on the process. I mean, you've done an amazing job doing this, Darren, so think of it as an idea. But I would love it if students had served on SAC first before they look at the student. So one thing I would love to see on there, and I don't want to have identifying criteria, because I do want it to be where you're not, favoring students that you like, and I get that. But I would not want somebody as a student rep unless they served in SAC before. At least I would lean against that, because I think what I saw, and not to butter you guys up too much here, but I watched you all lead the SAC as students, and I think having students who participated in that would be better place to lead it, when they stepped up to those leadership roles of a student rep. So I would at least love to see on the application if they have participated in SAC before, and then I think that would be a big plus, and particularly if they participated and maybe led like one of these initiatives, particularly, because that would then give me confidence they can serve as in a student rep capacity. But I don't want to.
Okay, that's
That understanding. So if that was the criteria, Anna would have been allowed to use two track. She did not participate in the SAC.
That's a good point too. But she was here a lot. So.
But she wasn't on that SAC before, then
True.
she wasn't active.
Yeah.
So I just,
All right.
so like there are things that may exclude others.
But
That's a
you
good
can't
point.
go a lot of meetings prior to.
Yeah, I was like basically on the SAC.
A lot.
Yeah,
Representative Johnson Law.
well, I was gonna say, and also too, like, if, from an equitable standpoint, if it's like, okay, maybe like one or two from the SAC, that's fine, but I'm thinking, like, no offense to any of us. Like, before we were elected, like, we technically didn't have a box to say we were, serving on the SBOE, so like, should we hold our students to the same standard? You know what I'm saying? Because.
Yeah.
Don't judge, you ran for reelection. Alistair ran for reelection, so that's one thing. But I don't think Representative Williams or Kool-Aid or myself or Henderson, or, well, any of us like before, this is my first time on the SBOE. I believe this is the first time for all of you as well. So if that's the criteria to run for the State Board of Education as a elected official, why should we hold that? We shouldn't hold that standard to our students either. Just because they may not have come into our meetings doesn't mean they don't have something to offer.
I agree wholeheartedly, especially thinking of like students who may be seniors. Who like didn't even know that this opportunity existed. But they were able to find out about it now and they were a good fit or a perfect fit. And just that, you know, have someone else have that leg up, or, you know, because they've known about it previously. I don't think that should be a reason to have that person necessarily advance a little further or given that extra push. From an equitable stance, I think that we should just let the application be as is. I think it's been a really good application process. And I don't think that we've run into any challenges in the past with it. And so that I would just agree with you with that.
And I'd like to add, there are certain schools that I've noticed that are very good at getting this information to their students, that you see a higher population of children coming from year after year after year. I know the LEA in which I worked at, they didn't know about for a minute, and then once I brought it to their attention and publicized it, you know, we saw more people make applications. So definitely would not want to penalize anybody because their school doesn't advertise it or help them to know about it. They, you know, there are a lot of school leaders, because they are so busy, they don't prioritize, you know, this application process, so their students don't know as much about it. You really have to kind of get out there and get that information out to them. And it usually disadvantages those children that are east of the river. I'm just gonna say that and own it, because maybe their, you know, their activities, they're just not pushing up toward that. So I just wanted to say that out loud for the record, is that I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity, regardless of what age they are and their, you know, prior service or not. Thank you.
Representative Thompson.
Representative Thompson?
I don't know if it should be a criteria, but I do think it's helpful to know if students have been on the SAC or have attended SBOE meetings in the past. I do think our most, like, one of the things that's different about the representatives versus the students on the SAC is that they do lead the SAC itself, and our students have done a really good job, I would say overwhelmingly, in managing those meetings. But I do think that familiarity does help. And if we're thinking about like the analogy, you know, none of us could say we had been on the board before. I do think that's true. And that's why I'm not saying it should be criteria. But before running for the board, I was familiar with the board, right? Like I had worked with my SBOE rep. I had testified and I had come to SBOE meetings, which I think was really helpful, just having some familiarity. So I would not want it to be criteria to exclude, but I would want it to be information that is available, just so I get a sense of like where, like their familiarity. And I know that was true for like, Anna wasn't a student rep, but she came to, you know, she knew some things about the board, or a colleague had been on the SAC before. And so I don't want to say if you haven't had that opportunity, then you know, we wouldn't consider you. But I do think it is helpful to consider, because I'm also considering the other students' experiences on the SAC as well. Because I want a robust body, and I think we've seen that, especially this year.
It could also be a question about civic engagement in general. Like, for example, both Khalik and I weren't on the SAC, but were very engaged in like DC education and DC politics. I'm sure he's not here because he's like at the Wilson building or something. So it could be, yeah, he's doing something.
Right.
So it could be more of a question, less specifically about the SAC and more just about general experience in DC and DC education.
They hosted a whole student forum,
Yeah,
you know.
he's
a couple weeks ago.
very impressive.
So, yeah. Representative King.
Yeah, I think people are a little bit confused on what the like issue is and like are kind of talking in circles. I don't think like, or at least the way I see it, I don't think anyone wants to give being on the SEC specific special treatment. I think it's less about like what you're a part of and more about what opportunities you do and like take advantage of. And so like, for example, if I'm at a school and all I have is my like book club, then like then like showing that I like, if in my application, I would write about how I made sure to attend my book club and I always did my reading and I had lengthy discussions and really enjoyed it. And how this like helped me in my life and like how I want to apply this to the SEC. Maybe I read a really good book about like cultural appropriation, just like thinking back to a presentation I saw last night, cultural appropriation, like the limits of that. And like you can already see like something interesting from there. I don't think we should give the SEC any special information, but I think at most we could look at if someone cites the SAC as like one of their activities, then we would probably want to see like, okay, well, did they actually show up? So we could cross-reference their attendance and like see exactly what they did. Because if all they said is, also, I was on the SAC, so I should be a SBOE rep. We want to at least see like, did you take advantage of the opportunities provided to you? Or did you just like not show up all year? And we have all the attendance records.
Other comments? Right.
The only thing is, and I will say, one of the reasons, even our student reps this year, again, were more organized and the meetings went better for the SAC, is because for the first time ever, we did a student representative orientation that we never done before. For the first time ever, there was consistent staff leadership that met with them the Thursday before. So I think there were other things in place that contributed to how well our student reps were able to help, given the space to lead, because there were other capacities that the staff and others put in place that supported them in their leadership. And so I think combined, those things will hopefully have the next set of representatives also flourish just as well. But I get the point, yes.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. All right, well, thank you, and we look forward to the final version of the SAC annual report and the scoring rules for the next 2 years student representative. Members, anticipate vote in your box next week, okay? That being said, we will now debrief on the May public meeting panel, which is on the topic of students experiencing homelessness. Members, you have in your materials a summary document with key highlights from the panel. Do members have any comment, next steps that they would like to raise? I'm sorry, Representative Anderson.
I think there are a lot of reasons to expect that this is gonna get worse and not better. So I know we've talked in the past about the community schools, supports like that. We should continue advocating for those type of supports that I fear will be even more necessary in the near future.
Yes, I agree with you with all the cuts are happening and budget constraints, and we're gonna be deep into it, within the next month or so, as we see the council kind of finalize a lot of things that they're doing. This matter of homelessness, and to go along with that, just the ability to make it from day to day, maybe a lot tougher if they cut a lot of support programs, safety net programs, or the funding to them. Both on the federal and local level. So, most definitely. Other questions, comments?
I agree with the concern the Representative Henderson and there's no rate. I think that, our leadership meeting, we should ask Austin directly, now that the mayor's budget is out, what particular, funding gaps they see that need to be filled and kind of, solicit their opinion on that so that we can kind of work collaboratively on this, but at the end of the day, you know, they're gonna be one of the key agencies that are looking to do outreach on this issue. So I think that's one step we should take. And then I was also, one of my key takeaways from the hearing was also just how you know, schools are overwhelmed with having individual point people who are sometimes the only homeless liaison for that school. And so I'm wondering, you know, if we can talk with DCBS in particular, maybe the Charter Alliance to think about how we can make this a more shared responsibility. Especially as we know that some of the broader community supports that you know, these vulnerable youth rely on might not be funded in the same budget.
And I agree with you, Representative, in the sense of, I remember the one analyst who basically talked about there could be some changes to the funding model, so to speak. I'm going from line items to like block grants and what that means and that effect that it could possibly have. So I think it's imperative that we do try to talk to our superintendent, Ossie, just to find out or get some insight to what they're doing as far as how they're gonna be funded, how these programs are gonna be funded, how they're gonna be passed through the federal government, because that's where you're gonna see a lot of the biggest changes is how we're funding these things and what was cut, what's not cut. As we talk about the federal bill and how that trickles down to us. So I agree with you. I believe Johnson Law, you want to ask a question?
I was gonna ask, Vice President Williams, like, did council, you talking about the recent hearing that they just had on the rental act, that one? Were you talking about that one? Or are you talking about?
It's a conjunction of things, it's not one single thing, that would be included, but I think just also, what we heard, what the mayor released in the council.
Have you heard anything about like more supports for kids, if there might be increase or influx in homelessness or like more coordinated services from different agencies at all? In your hearings or no?
No, we did, I mean, my understanding just from the hearing in particular was that there was more concerns that it's going to get worse. You know, not necessarily that we can expect broader coordination, so that's why it's deeply concerning that we're kind of being asked to do more with less, and therefore need to really work more collaboratively to make sure as experts put that students don't fall through the cracks.
And as they change the requirements beyond different programs, it's just gonna be interesting. As we see at the local budget, there's gonna be requirements, Medicaid, things like that. As requirements change, that could inflate the number of homelessness in itself. Representative?
I think one question I'd love someone from our team to help look into from policy analyst team is the role of navigation versus supply in this problem, because if there's not much a navigate coordination support can do if there's no service to help with the problem. And if there's if there's no housing to help get you to, what is the purpose of having more navigators versus having more housing? Right? And so as benefits get cut, funding more navigators to get onto benefits doesn't solve a problem because there are no more benefits to get onto. Right? And so I think I just want to better understand from the panel, it was not super clear to me how much of the problem there is no supply of resource. And so it's just a nice friendly person who's talking to you and hears you versus there are resources that exist that our students are not able to access and don't know how to navigate getting onto. If that is the problem, then we need more navigators. Right. But if that is not the problem, I don't think I fully understand in the hierarchy of needs why we would not push for more student housing or more housing for families to start with.
And I think, I think part of it, and I know Dr. Colson, Representative Colson is not here, and this is one of her things, that a lot of the funding that there's all up in the air because there's no federal budget. So like the city is putting forth a budget that may or may not align with the gaps that will come up because they're not in sync. And so I do think the budget questions are still to be figured out. Hopefully by the fiscal year. But I think one of the things on the sheet that Taylor put together is to anticipate the increase in, looking at the Title I Part A funding to provide resources. And so I think, Title I is not going away, because that's something that's in every state, every district. For all of us, like people in Congress. And so I think that is going to be replaced now. All the other, whether the other funds will block grant and how they will shift and how much will not be in the federal budget. I think you can try that analysis now, but I just don't know if it'll be as fruitful until there's more information from both the federal and what DC decides at the end.
And
It's a budget process.
I would just, yeah, I would add to that, like, if you all decide to write a resolution or move work forward on this in a committee, then we absolutely would look into that.
Other comments? Representative.
I'm just wondering if, I feel like this would situate well in, the student experience committee. So I think with your support, I'd like to refer it there, to figure out what specific next steps, we could do so that we can at least we can bring things up with, OSSI in formal, leadership meetings, but also have the board continue that work so that in July we can get additional ideas as to what, would be helpful. And I've heard a lot of what Executive Butler said and Representative Chang, and I do think it's a both and situation with coordination pieces and funding pieces and community schools and connected schools on the chopping block, like making sure students can launch, making sure students can get snacks, making sure students can get meals, making sure students have books, like all these things are gonna become more scarce if we don't have some funding for it.
Right, I appreciate that. I'm gonna let Representative Goulet, because he's the chair of that committee, speak to it a little bit.
So we will heartily accept it, and we actually have the 5 members of the committee all lined up in a row right here. That wasn't on purpose, but it was just so we could all be here together to accept this challenge, and we're excited to do it, so. We would love it if you referred our way.
I do have one request though, to Representative Goulet and to leadership. Is that maybe for this specific,
This specific, like if they're sending an issue to us.
yeah, this specific issue. Could we have also Dr. Colson maybe kind of help us with this? I know she's not on our committee, but I know this is something that she's been really passionate about. I know she worked hard to get that panel together. And so we would, she's not here,
Yeah,
but I would love.
I don't have to assign her. I don't think she actually has to be assigned, but she is welcome to come to those meetings and present and add context
Okay,
to those meetings. To make sure that, those things are taken into consideration, because this is a key issue.
Well, and just to add to that, I keep trying to recruit her to join our committee because, we should consider that because we only have the 3 of us for the summer. So we will get our student reps back in fall, but having an odd number of people would always help us out, so. I'll make my pitch to her later, but having her leadership on this issue would be great.
Director Butler, I feel like this is like a operating procedure thing. Is there something for Dr. Colson? I didn't know.
It would be, yes, it would be, it would be an administrative thing, and we're going to try to be counsel to that.
Oh, that would be,
Yeah, that would be.
committee appointments is done by the president.
Right.
Not a thing that I was not like, so
Yeah.
it would have to be passed and voted on at
Right.
public meeting. But at any point in time, the president can reconstitute the membership of the committee.
And we can talk more about that.
Just wanted to include her. I didn't want her to, I know she's not here and I don't want to speak for her, but I know this is a big issue that she's part of, so wanted to.
Yeah, and I also want to say, I think one of the things that I don't know the McKinney-Vento Act very deeply, but one of the concerns from the panelists is that it will be repealed. And so, once that is repealed, that then may also take away people's. That may be one of the reasons I honestly have a position for this is because it's mandated by law, kind of thing.
And that particular act is very important when you're homeless and you're trying to register for school. That's a very important act, as a person who's had registration, at Elliott and stuff like that. Once you say you're homeless, you don't have to go through a lot of other things that are required to show residency, just by that state. I do want to ask, as we refer this to your committee and everything like that, and I get this from Director Butler, what is the thing that we're trying to get out of our or are we doing a resolution? What is the thing that you're going to be working for? What's it that you see
I mean, I think they can talk about that in committee and then report back once they've had time to think about it, is my view on that. I think that, you know, the council now has the budget, so I think it's incumbent on all of us to kind of, to see how we can advocate for things in the interim. But I don't see a decision needing to be made for that at this point.
And I also think it may be helpful as a follow-up in the notes, that we specifically, make a request of Representative Colton. See if there's anything that she wants specifically to be followed up in the panel, since she wasn't able to join us today. Because I know the notes will go out to everyone.
Do that.
All right, thank you so much. All right, with that being said, we'll move on to the agenda. So I thank everyone. As a reminder, the new public meeting panel topic will be a focus on special education graduation requirements. As I look across the table and see the smile on Representative Johnson Law's face. So we will not be holding a public meeting in July. We will resume public meeting panel topics discussion at the next working meeting. So we are having a working meeting in July. My understanding, we should not have a public meeting in July. So that being said, as a reminder, members, the public meeting panel topic tracker is included in the weekly roundup emails. We all get it, because I get it. That document is where the members should enter their ideals for August and September public meeting panels. Okay? With that being said, although we're speaking through our schedule, I'm still going to say that we should take a quick break for about 5 minutes. That's it. And so we're going to take a break for 5 minutes. Thank you. We will return at, I'm going to give you guys an actually look for Gonna call us back to order. Next on the agenda are committee reports. I will call on each committee in alphabetical order. If you are a committee chair or co-chair, you can use the time to share out, solicit feedback, and answer questions from your committee. I will start with the administrative committee, and that is Vice President Williams.
Yes, thank you, President President. All right. We did meet, we had a short but impactful meeting. Many of the topics, as you can see, were around the ombudsman, the office of advocate, and state board also trying to fill vacancies and some of the hiring that is underway with each of their teams. The other thing to note is that our fiscal year 2026 proposed budget is the same as the fiscal year 2025 approved budget. However, there's a meaningful difference in that it includes a $105,000 one-time enhancement, which we are working to kind of reclassify. And then the committee also talked about the COLA asks in which that were included in the president's testimony at council this past week. Any questions? All right, thank you all.
All right, very quickly. College careers and life readiness, Representative Thompson and Representative Henderson.
I'll take this, they met on May 28th. We were joined by President Patterson to share updates on his outreach on resolution for high quality education as a civil right. We talked about requesting some additional information about the feedback that he has received in his outreach, and to provide feedback to him on the draft resolution, and plan to vote on that at the next committee meeting. We discussed the application selection process for the graduation task force. The application is now live, and the group joined us to talk about an outreach strategy, which he is in the midst of implementing. And while he is doing that work, I do also invite all board members to assist in that, to try to spread the application information widely, and also to use your contacts that you have in your ward to make sure that those people who are most affected and invested are aware of the opportunity, have access to that application. And finally, in light of the testimony that we received at the last public meeting about the social emotional standards that we have, learning standards, we revisited the idea that we need to create some kind of feedback loop so that we are seeing how the standards that we have approved are being implemented in schools. Not sure what that might look like, but we put that on our plate as something to.
One thing there, that's great, because I think I've heard enough from enough teachers that they're a bit frustrated with us constantly adding standards when they don't have the capacity to add new things. And so I would love to approach it not as a, why haven't you done this? But also as an understanding of what support would we need to actually have done to have made these new standards actionable, right? Because you know my bias here. If we add standards, something else kind of has to go. We don't do that, right? We're just adding and piling on top. And so I would love to hear, as you guys are doing this research, what would allow for, how do we support you to actually do this?
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think Representative Thompson brought this up, and I believe it's safe for me to say for her that the idea is to see and hear. It's not a like check on you if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, but like, how is this working? How can we help?
President Thompson has her hand raised.
Representative Thompson.
Sorry, yeah, I'm still moving slow. Yes, it is both. So if we recall the testimony from the young man, he specifically brought up SEL and thought it was important. And so I don't think the goal here is to identify blame. It really is to better understand. Whether it's been SEL, whether it's been literacy recommendations or financial literacy, I want to make sure that we have some insight into how things are being implemented, but also how people are experiencing the supports and how they're making decisions about, what this looks like real time. A lot of things were thrown on plates, this is the first year. And so I do think it's important for people like us who pass policies to trust that things are happening, but also to verify so we can be good representatives for our school communities and saying, hey, we thought this was a good idea, but we found out for teachers they need more of this. Or hey, maybe we rolled out too many of something, or we didn't know that this was going to be important, but actually it turned out that was a really great thing. And so the goal here is not really to identify particularly negative or particularly positive. It really is about information gathering, and for us as board members as a whole to better understand how our children are learning and what experiences are happening in our schools.
Great. Other questions? Maybe?
I don't have a question. I appreciate the thoughtfulness of that. I think that'll guide standards of limitation across all of our issues. So I'm interested in hearing back, and that's also something that, we can bring up with us when we talk with them.
I don't see any other questions. I just want to thank you guys, committee members, for allowing me to join you guys, of course. I think it's been exhibition on all the committees, so thank you again. And the discussion and your feedback, Representative Henderson, as far as the proposed resolution on public education, quality education, and civil rights. We'll be talking a little bit more about it in business. As I said, as we went through that particular thing, I asked for what needed to be done to move it forward. There were things that were stated, so I want to talk a little bit more about that a little bit later in our agenda. Okay, but I appreciate it. Thank you. We would now move to educator excellence.
Great. So we have one key thing that we're trying to accomplish this year, which is how can the city better support new educators, first year teachers, highest churn, right? And so last month you heard about our panel that we had where we brought in some folks to learn about their experiences, and we're following up on some of that, including revisiting why some of the programs that used to exist to support new teachers that actually some of the panelists said were really great, why those were cut. We're going to be following up on the resolution that we had passed in 24 as well, and just kind of build off of those recommendations and follow through on, I think, not just the broad ask for support for new teachers, but get more into the weeds of how we can make it actionable by learning more from other states about how they have effectively implemented those best practices. From our last public meeting, we heard about H-1B visas and the issue there. So we flagged that it probably we do not have enough time to have the committee meet again before this issue is likely out of, we just don't have enough time for it to be meaningful to do anything more formal than to have individual representatives reach out to your council members, to the mayor, so mayor's office, etc. So Rep. Henderson sent an email out that I believe everyone is CC'd on.
Yes,
great. So if folks would consider using that as a template, if you feel strongly about this and want to support, then look at that, forward it, use it as a template, and help us raise our voices there. And that is all from our side, but do expect that we'll be pushing harder for support for first year teachers and by the end of this committee's life cycle.
Yes, Representative.
So I wanna, build on, Representative Ching, what you said. Thank you for your leadership and focus with this. It's been very helpful and, Jen, for your, ability to move this work forward as well. I want us to kind of frame this issue, right, as the work the board's been doing for years on teacher retention. And so this is just one high leverage strategy that, you know, Representative Ting's talked about, like his experiences losing teachers mid-year, losing teachers from year to year. And that happens citywide and happens nationally. It's a huge problem. And so this is, after considerable thought, after years of investment, after many reports, what is the one thing citywide that we think can make the biggest impact on supporting like teachers, particularly newer teachers who need the most support? And that is the rationale behind why the committee is taking a laser focus on this issue. So just want to make that clear.
All right, thank you. The other questions, comments? All right. Thank you, sir. We'll now move to student advisory.
Yeah, so during our May Student Advisory Committee meeting, we announced and discussed our June 9th senior celebration, which all of you are invited to. We will be celebrating the departing seniors at 5 o'clock, which is the time our committee usually meets. So it'll be in this room. You're welcome and encouraged to come. We would love to see you there. We also spent most of the time drafting the annual report, which you've seen the fruits of our labor of today. We heard Representative Ting introduce SR 25-8, calling for public funding for the Public Charter Schools Athletic Association, which was voted unanimously plus one abstention in favor. Representative Best introduced SR 25-10, supporting the expansion of Shirley Chisholm Elementary School into a dual language education campus. That was passed unanimously, and Representative Boulay introduced, and we discussed SR 25-9, calling for changes to compulsory public school attendance and enrollment requirements in DC. This was the most controversial resolution discussed and ended with a vote with 15 in favor, 4 opposed, and 1 abstention. We have since finished our annual report, and we're looking forward to the senior celebration.
All right, yeah, Representative Ting.
And then building off on that, and there's another ask to, again, share the sign up links to the SAC, like with your networks, with your social media, just share the flyer, also to principals and teachers, you know, and that way, as like President Patterson and others were saying earlier, we can reduce the equity barriers to joining the SAC. I really do want to see more students east of the river. I know the Thurgood Marshall Academy and like colleagues, friends are there, but like that's like kind of where the representation ends.
And members should have those flyers in your materials.
And just as an update, we emailed every single high school principal, whether charter and other charter version of it. Right. And they got a copy of the flyer and they asked to share it with their teachers and their school counselors.
Thank you.
That is already done. I've got many. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you.
All right, thank you so much. We'll now move to student experience and engagement, Representative Boulay from Ward 3.
Yes, so going through this agenda here, I want to get some highlights to it. First one was we talked with Representative Best about the Civics Engagement Week. What he wanted to do is continue to work with members of the community to continue to strengthen the resolution. So we voted to postpone that until June or until when Representative Best felt it was the best time to move that forward. So we're going to keep working with him and with Darren on that and bring it forward when he's ready to go with that. Representative King moved forward the draft resolution of the student cultural clubs. We had great feedback from a student who's been very supportive of that, and we moved that forward unanimously. Then we had a discussion, and you had sent this to our committee to discuss the Student Fair Access to School Amendment Act, which was interesting. I read that through thinking we would find some smoking guns about why we have discipline issues in the schools. And I was actually surprised because after reading the bill through, at least from my perspective, and then the discussion we had, we didn't see anything in the bill that necessarily by itself would trigger an issue that would prevent there being appropriate discipline in the schools. So what we decided was we need to really think more about it. We need to get together with some experts, and then it was suggested that we have not at the meeting, but subsequently then have our leaders, both at the Office of the Student Advocate and the Ombudsman, to come in and speak on safety issues and give us their perspectives on that. So we're going to do that. Also, Representative Barnes led the discussion on safe passages, which was further at his request. And we're going to have the representative who runs the Safe Passages program for the city come and speak to the committee on the same issue to see what, if any, safety improvements can be made with the program. The goal of this would be to try to get advice from those experts who really interact with students regularly and see what the low-hanging fruit are here and see if those are things that we can tackle as a committee and then as a board in the fall. So like if there's something that is causing students to be truant, for example, because they're afraid to come to school, they're afraid to get to school, or they're afraid in school, how do we address that in a way that's responsive, but doesn't swing? And I'm going to steal your quote, Representative Best, because I thought it was really good. If the pendulum may have swung too far in the other direction, I think we want to put it at the right place without then swinging too far in the other direction. So trying to find that right medium on this is the goal of the committee, and something that we're going to look forward to after we hear from these experts. So that's what we set out to do. We're also then going to try to meet with the DC Education Research Collaborative. We talked about that. Dara Shah is going to come in. She had offered to provide feedback through her organization and potentially research support on the idea of truancy and chronic absenteeism. So we're going to look at that. Lastly, we discussed the idea for student listening sessions. The committee of the whole held one in March. So our thought was, you know, we try to get one early to mid-October when students have been back for a while. And I think Dr. Fleischer came up with the title for it, which I thought was really good. It would be First Impressions of School. So the students would be coming back, telling us what they thought was working well, what still needed work, and it would be a great opportunity just to hear from students across the city and get their perspectives. So that is what we did in the committee. We also talked about having a binder of former committee-related resolutions to read over for the summer to see what we've committed to as a board earlier, and so that those resolutions just aren't lost, that we would then follow up on things that we committed to, and if agencies committed to things for us, we would ask, well, where is that? How's that going? So the work continues, and we don't forget about things we approved previously. So that was the totality of the committee work, and I'm glad to take any questions on what was discussed there.
Question, right?
I'll start. Thank you, Representative Goulet. Thank you to members of the committee. It seems to just in hearing that there's a lot of kind of issues there. In terms of the workflow, like if you were to point to like the top priorities of the committee right now, what would you say they are?
Well, I think for me, obviously, you know, we have to deal with, you know, crises as they come up. I mean, what I'd like to focus on as a unifying force for the committee would be the issue of student safety, and particularly as it relates to chronic absenteeism. So look at the issue of absenteeism, look at the issue of safety, and really look to our experts. And we have true experts here that I think, you know, we've reached out to now and said, give us what your solutions are, because they hear from students and families over and over again what the complaints are. So like hearing from Dan, hearing from, you know, our safe passages experts, like these are the people that we should go to, and they should tell us what's there first, because they're on the front lines of this. So that would be, to me, a priority to try to get a resolution together with the committee members that addresses some of these issues for the fall. I think we can also walk and chew gum on the issue of the homeless services, because that's something that's really passionate to a member who came in the committee, spoke about it. And then on the issue of the civics engagement week, I mean, that's something, again, that's a passion of an individual member of the committee. And, you know, I know that Representative Best will probably be doing the bulk of that work, working with Dr. Fleischer. So that'll be something that will flow through the committee, but I don't think will be a focus of every member. I don't feel like I need to devote my time to putting in a deep dive into civics engagement week, because Representative Best has the expertise in that. So long way of answering your question. I think as a committee, We want to tackle certain priorities like safety, like special education, which, is really important for one of the members. And then the issue of homeless services, but that doesn't mean that other resolutions can't move through as well. And I think Representative Best is a good example of that, because that's something that he's put a lot of work into, and we can move forward. So those would be what I would look for the fall. But if there's other things that you think we need to tackle in the interim, we're glad to add it to the list.
Yeah, I don't necessarily see the need for any new things. I think you all have a full plate there. I think that, having been on that committee previously and worked very heavily with Dr. Fleischer, like Dara has met with our committee previously multiple times. So I think there's already a lot of, suggestions for exploring the connection between, truancy and student safety and that relationship. So, I just encourage the committee to kind of lean on what he already has, because, we have had, Dan come to the committee before and also do that. So, but I'm appreciating that you are keeping that work moving forward, in that sense.
And one other thing to add on this is this year, more than any, I think that's ever occurred at the board, is the student reps started doing their own resolutions, which then came through the committee too. So kudos to the two of you for moving those then along. I mean, some of them moved even before I had the committee, but like having a pipeline for the students to put together actual resolutions that then move through the committee, assuming that they're related to student engagement, which most are. That's something I want to look forward to in the fall, is working with SAC to keep up the same level of productivity that you all have done this year. And, if we can have our student advisory committee working with the student reps on there and feeling like they can actually pass resolutions and get things done that move the needle, I think that's going to encourage a lot more students to be interested and to stay interested in SAC.
Actually, that kind of something that pops up in my head is maybe during the orientation, if it's, I think it's late August, right? If I don't know if I'll be in Boston yet, but could you possibly invite the former reps like us to maybe talk to the new reps? Like even through like Zoom or something?
Orientation.
Yeah.
He would start before, he would start.
I mean, you can even join virtually.
Yeah, just like a Teams call, or like, give them, at least like give them my like contact, so I could just like chat with them.
Absolutely.
All right, anything else?
And that's a mouthful.
Thank you for your report, Representative. Members,
I will
go ahead.
be following up with you on something, because I want to make sure we're following the rules on this, but we're going to either need you as ex officio, or we're going to be good, because we are losing 3 of our 6 committee members, but they're all the student rep side. So I jest a little bit, but I would actually, seriously, if we offer to T. Michelle Colson to join the committee, then that would make sure we have quorum for the summer. And I just, like, technically, we'd be down to 3 members out of 6. I don't know that that's a problem procedurally or not, but so we could use you. 3 is not over 50%. So we could add her, and then we would have a tiebreaker for the fall if she wants to join us, or we could use you ex officio, or we could interpret the rule to be that if the student reps aren't here, they don't count against
They
quorum.
do not count, because they're technically will fall for their term ends June 30th.
But that would leave with 3 vacancies. Would that be?
Well, the committee doesn't have like a certain number of slots to be filled.
So those slots would just be vacant, and we would be the 3 of us, so we
Yeah,
get 2.
and you all would set the new form.
Okay,
Yes,
Okay.
because technically, until, because the next set of student reps may not choose that committee.
oh, we're gonna.
Yeah. They may choose, educator excellence or college career and life readiness. And so at that point in the fall, then we would have to do another resolution. But the president have to then put that.
We have student experience in our name, so they're gonna
Yes.
come there.
We'll hold.
Is that how you decide?
That is-
I decided because I wanted to push the legislation for that.
All right, anything else? Going once, going twice, okay. We will now move to, external committees. If there are, external committee reports, we'll do them now. I'm seeing a hand raised by Representative Betts from grade 6. Let's go.
All right, so for the math task force, continuing to meet, there's one more meeting left. So far, the focus has been on high quality instructional material and professional development. There's been like conversations around like graduation requirements and hours, thoughts of like expanding or expansion of the algebra 2 allocation to also include integrated math. So integrated math is like a course that includes all forms of math. And so thinking of the advantages are more like real world applications, emphasizing mathematical modeling, critical thinking, and problem solving skills, which are like more aligned to the college and career readiness exams and workplace expectations. So there is still outreach that will be done to really like determine if that is actually going to be one of the things that is incorporated. There has also been an emphasis on family engagement as a significant component of the work that needs to be done. Right now, there's like a conversation of a state math night. I think we need to do a little bit more than just the state math night. But there are also, yeah, I love it. Bring it one down. And also like parent toolkits. But the challenge right now is for the meantime, like there's no significant budget allocation to the family engagement work. And so, I mean, I know that they said that it'll probably be there later on, but right now, no. And so that's also going to present another challenge when we're thinking about like, how do we actually ensure that we're leveraging our parents as partners in academic success, or academic outcomes. So, yeah, so that's pretty much where we are with the math task forces. We have one more meeting and I'll share the updates after that.
Any other external committee reports at this particular time? Seeing none, we'll move to new business and other discussions. Instead of reading the full list, I will ask members to review the list on the agenda and share now if there are any additional topics that you would like to add. Representative Boulay.
I would like to go the other way, if that's okay. So I would like to remove my own item from the list, and it would be letter I. And I will explain briefly why that is. Good. Is after talking with members on the issue of the kindergarten issue, I think one of the things that people emphasized was the idea to solve the immediate issue without trying to then put something permanent in place. I think those concerns Representative Best had raised about changing the definition on an ongoing basis of a educational institution or a school. So we wanted to try to avoid that. And the emergency and temporary legislation, which I will talk about later, is only in effect for a total of 315 days. So if we remove the permanent, what that does is it gives us an opportunity to hear from educational experts, hear from DCPS more, hear from the council, and then work together on a long-term solution to some of these issues. Like the appropriate age of enrollment for kindergarten, how we reach out to facilities at OSSI, and it doesn't pin us in, it solves the immediate solution. So unless there's any objection, I'd like to take the permanent bill off the table for now, and then we can focus on the emergency and temporary solutions when we get to that. So without objection, I'd like to remove I.
All right, thank you.
Any addition?
Any addition?
No, I'd just like to ask a clarifying question. That procedure there, okay.
Yeah.
Right. So then can you clarify, I know it's been a while, why there's a need for F, G, and H?
Yes.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
We just need to make sure there's nothing else to be added and then.
And then
can go
got
through the list.
it's always.
Are there any other things to add?
I appreciate that.
But I will add something. I would like to add, board retreat in September. Thank you. Just about dates, no contact, so you can put it out.
And I'm going to add I'm going to add, a discussion or so around, body education and the civil rights that discussed toward the end. Okay. Thank you. We will now start with the OSSI response letter on graduation requirement. Yes.
Can I ask?
Go right ahead.
Question? Yeah, so at the council, the requirement for council when passing emergency legislation is you first have to declare the existence of an emergency. So you have to first state why you're not going through the normal public process of a hearing. And then the two votes before Congress, not two votes before Congress, but the two votes at council. And then the passive approval of Congress. So what that is you're declaring that due to the timing of this issue, there's not time for the traditional public process, which usually can take anywhere from 6 months to a year. And obviously the issue with kindergarten is starting in the fall, so there's a need for a solution before then. So that would be the declaration of an emergency. Now, for council to declare an emergency requires a supermajority, traditionally 9 votes. It may be 8 or 9 right now because there's a number missing from council. And then what follows it up then is an emergency act. Now, what's required now with an emergency act is that's only good for 90 days. And you can't do successive emergencies. So council then follows up with an identical bill that's a temporary act. So that's good for an additional 225 days. And the thought process then is that usually then you have time to have discussions, you have a hearing, and then you introduce permanent legislation. That would be the goal here because obviously we're not going to solve all these issues in the emergency. That's just to prevent families from being harmed imminently. So we would want to work with our partners at council, and I've had really good feedback talking with people there so far on a permanent fix to this. But we have such a wealth of experts here. We should reach out to them on this, on issues like, what's the right age to start kindergarten? What really is the right age to start kindergarten? What type of exception should be given for students with developmental delays? Who should grant those exceptions? Because that's not even clear. And then how do we reach out to facilities that right now didn't have notice and need additional clarity in terms of what those requirements are? All that can be accomplished in the permanent bill. I'm not going to try to solve that in the emergency. We'll just try to solve the immediate crisis. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I understand the intent. I understand a lot of the questions that are raised. I understand now the emergency declaration purpose. And I still don't understand the difference between the emergency amendment act and the temporary amendment.
So an emergency is good for only 90 days. So it expires after 90 days. By rule, you can't do successive emergencies because what Congress wanted to avoid is council like dodging congressional review by just passing a 90-day bill, another 90-day law, another 90-day law, and keep going like that. Because then, Congress was worried at the time that council would avoid their review. So a temporary it requires 2 votes, and then it goes to Congress for the passive approval. And that gives them the time in that 315-day period to be able to come up with a permanent solution. That's usually the goal. Now, you can do another emergency and temporary round, but that's usually disfavored. If something was that important, you want to try to work towards a solution within that 315 days, and then not, and then not just have to do another round of emergency and temporary. That's ideal, at least. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Yeah. And just for the process on this, just so everybody's clear, I put everything in this comparative print right here. The current emergency temp and deck reflect what was approved for committee. So the way we'll move this is we'll look at the resolution, we'll look at the changes here, and then I will move, after members make any changes or recommendations, I'll move those acts as amended. And then we'll make those changes so it's all reflected when we vote at the public meeting.
Any other questions? I appreciate it. So let's get into this because we got quite a few. And I want to be very confident and appreciative of everyone's time. So I know everybody's probably going to have some questions, but try to make sure that your questions are clear and concise so that we can get out of here at a time. With that being said, we're going to start with OSSI response letter of graduation requirement. A brief discussion on that. It was sent out as illustrated to Director Butler at the beginning of the month. Hey, and just want to hear what people think As far as the response, just to have a quick discussion on it. Were there any questions, additions? I see Representative Johnson Law.
Thank you, President Patterson. I'll be really succinct. First of all, I know Aussie is working really hard on this. I know we all are. I just have pause about creating an alternate diploma instead of us creating an alternate route. Does that make sense? Because those are two different things. Like an alternate diploma, even though it is state recognized, could still have like certification implications, especially with students trying to be able to get a job, whether it may be college, is it going to be acceptable? There's so many different things. And then even in their comments about modifications permitted within the ESSA definition, they say many, and sorry, folks, I'm on page 22. Many states exclude alternative diplomas from like federal reporting. Does anyone know what ACGR means? Anybody know? Do you know what that is? ACGR.
Adjusted cohort graduation rate.
Wow.
Adjusted cohort graduation rate.
Thank you. Thank you, Representative Thompson. That is super helpful. And so because ESSA has not defined it, and because it is excluded, I'm just wondering, are they doing that because they do not, again, recognize it as a diploma, which means I don't need to report it. Does that make sense? And so I just have pause. I just have pause, y'all. That's all. And so I'm just wondering, and I think Aussie is still on their listening tour with different stakeholders. I know we're gonna have our meeting. Just wanna flag that for everybody. This is something that I've actually talked to Representative Henderson and Representative Thompson about. I know we're creating, I was supposed to say committee, not a committee, a task force. And this is something that I would love to hear different experts and different stakeholders on, just about how we really uplift this population and give them the best chance possible to succeed, which is what I think we're all trying to do. So I feel like we're probably gonna be somewhere in the middle. But I do just I have so many more questions. And so I just want to raise that to the board. So that way when I ask these, y'all are not looking at me crazy.
I appreciate that. And I see Representative Thompson has her hand up. And I also want to acknowledge, because I missed it earlier, because I didn't see it in the chat, this, doing the external, committee report, she also listed that the NASB committees are on hiatus at this particular time. So I just wanted to make sure I stated that for the record, because it's in the chat. And so people can hear that. Representative Thompson, you're now coming to you, ma'am.
I would say maybe one of the things we should explore so that everybody's on the same page are things like, what does it mean to use different metrics like the adjusted cohort graduation rate? It is not, it's not federally mandated. It's not, certain things you're not gonna find in federal mandates, but they are helpful as far as just us knowing who's graduating. So for example, it accounts for things like transfers in and out. That way you wouldn't hold that against Anacostia if a student transfers to Woodson, right? So that's a different thing. Everything's not going to be at the level of ESSA. I think our goal should never be lesser pathways or diplomas. It should always be full graduation, full accreditation, and full opportunities for students. And so there are states who do have multiple diploma tracks, which would be alternatives, but it does not mean that they are lesser. And I think that for me, that should be our goal as a city.
Thank you. Other comments? Representative Henderson.
Briefly, Representative Johnson Law, I have that on my list of among the things that we need to explore further through the task force. I think generally, they shared a lot of their answers when they spoke with us working session. And I think generally they were helpful clarifying, answering those questions that we had, as well as updating us, because a lot has changed since November, I'm thinking that was a venue for us to see, what changes have happened. I think there's still a few areas, that I'm uncertain about, and, I think will be clarified in the proposal that they have, and then we'll dig get further on anything that we need to. But I appreciate, members flagging those things so that we can make sure the task force does address them, and also would invite people as they think about those things, if they're also thinking about voices that they want to weigh in on those things, to like make sure that we're reaching out with the opportunity.
Thank you. Other discussion points? All right. Seeing none, I'm going to move to our next topic. Follow up on SR 25-5, promoting DC STEM, supporting technology, equity, and math. And I'm coming to student representative Ching.
Yes, so I've been doing like advocacy and looking around, but it looks like, budget restrictions and things, we don't really know. I think I'll pause on my advocacy for funding for calculators, at least for the foreseeable future. And separately, in addition, I don't think calling like Texas Instruments or looking for private funding of a company would be appropriate for the State Board of Education or even someone outside the State Board of Education to do.
Can I talk on?
Yeah.
So, don't give up yet. So for my thinking on this isn't a lot of money. And what we should probably try to do, reaching out individually, is at least try to get to the chairman's office.
Okay.
And I will tell you, I have seen many times where they're just trying to put the pencils down on the budget. And there's like just a rounding error in terms of the overall budget, but it could be enough to fund something like this, even on a one-time basis. And if you get it in as a one-time funding, then you just go back next year. It's easier to get it next year. So I know there's a lot of, certainly legitimate concern about the overall PC budget, but something like this that's small, as you go into the rounding elements of like trying to just put pencils down, this is the type of thing that if like you get a champion in the budget office or in the chairman's office, it could end up in there. So I think it's a great thing you put forward. So just encourage you not to give up on it yet. I think advocacy could still get it through. So
Yeah.
I understand all the possible opportunities out there. Everybody's looking for money and it's a tough budget, but I think this could still get done. And I'd be glad to work with you. It's a great idea. So are you looking to take it off or just?
I'll just like kind of giving an update.
Well, because it's already been passed.
Oh, so this is, so.
You want to vote on this and
Yeah, but-
it's passed.
Yeah, so what's the follow-up in the sense of discussion?
Okay, all right.
But it's already been
Done.
passed.
But I just don't think we need to give up.
I would
on
great
it.
to
Yeah.
share with you, Representative.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. But,
Yeah.
so let's just, I'll talk to you afterwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're just basically talking about the budget at this particular time.
Okay,
Representative Johnson Law.
Because we didn't vote on this to like transmit it to legislation for council yet, right? Okay,
It was just voted.
It was just.
that was
voted
what
on
I was
the
wondering.
resolution.
Yeah, so
okay,
just-
okay.
So this is just talking about the resolution, not doing
Right.
further action.
And basically, if I'm understanding Representative Ting correctly, he's not trying to push it forward at this particular time as far as that's funding or whatever the case may be. That's the part I believe you're speaking to. So.
Yeah, I might continue trying with Eric's lead, but kind of like the way things are, it's just like,
And you're looking at budget constraints that we're currently.
yeah, facing, it's just like, nobody knows what's going on.
You just gotta be there
Appreciate that.
at the right time.
But we also understand the equity issue in this, that's what I'm talking about. It's always good to fight those equity issues.
Thank you.
You may have fans of math in the council's budget office, so.
That is true.
All right, that being said, we're gonna move to, SR 25-8, calling for public funding for public charter school athletic association. I'm coming back to student representative Tate.
Yeah, so it's more or less the same from last time. This is just flagging, the way we wrote it, the resolution raised some concerns among like certain constituents. And then I'm going to meet with them, like I had like time like book time in my calendar to meet and we're gonna do that. But basically, the way it was worded was that people thought that schools who aren't participating in this athletic association would have to pay. And then so I'm looking into like rewriting it. Specifically, I proposed, like I sent out an email to an amendment during that chaotic last public meeting. But the TLDR is, the old language said that like schools would be, schools like charter LEAs would be called upon to provide funding to meet the have at least like two people being paid and have security and like medals be able to be funded. And then the new wording would be in such a way that the funding is both equitable and it wouldn't charge organizations that aren't part of the PCSAA. The concern was raised by someone who isn't part of the PCSAA in that if you're the schools that are part of the PCSAA, the PCSAA is a collection of athletic directors, and then they all vote to elect one of the athletic directors as the president. And so was kind of raised by someone who wasn't really familiar of that thing. Like, I'm gonna stop talking there. Yeah.
I mean, this is a suggestion on this one. I mean, you put a lot of work in this. I think the change you're talking about really makes a lot of sense. What I would ask you to consider is if you look at the funding that's provided right now to the DC Public School Athletic Association, I think it's local funding. I don't think it's diverted from the UPSFF. I think it's separately locally funded. So I think it would make sense. I mean, we have roughly 50% of our students in each sector right now. So asking for it to be funded through a local appropriation, at least at the level that we see, our DCPS athletics funded. And then if schools want to supplement, through some sort of agreement or MOU they work out with additional funds for awards or for facilities or something, I think that would be good. But I would like to see our city put more of a commitment into athletics for all of our students. So I think matching this, I mean, even it's not part of UPSFF, but just in the spirit of the UPSFF, matching this funding over there. So we could write that language to advocate for that. And I think this is, again, the type of thing where if you get some seed money this year, it can then start taking off because you don't have to get the whole thing all at once in 1 year. So I love that you're supporting this. And I think like going to people who talk about more out of school time for youth, they might be natural advocates for something like this. So let's work on this one too. You and I can have office hours here. Prior to you leaving.
Yeah, I think the amendment we're trying to do is change it to say funded in an equitable way, so not specifically calling on specific charter LEAs, but it looks like we're looking at like I think we have two options. It's like either we just raise the prices for schools that are already participating to buy in, or we call upon the city council to fund it. The issue is that we don't know how to get the city council to fund it. So that's kind of like the big dilemma.
Okay. Representative. I don't know which one. Go right ahead.
I would just like to check on the funding for the CPS. I don't want to say that you're wrong, but I have been told by DCPS that it is UPSFF funding, so I think it's worth just verifying so that everyone's clear.
Right.
How it's working.
Right. And what I'll say to that is that when I brought that up as far as how they're funded, I got that from the charter alliance as far as how sports are. I was having a conversation with them. So I think it's incumbent on us to make sure we truly understand how their funding is done.
Or I think it's two different things. It's the funding for this like on the school level athletic directors. Athletic directors are always paid by the school, obviously.
Yeah, that's
But
correct.
then I know for the DCIA, which does DCPS, they're paid by DC Central, or DCPS Central Office, which pays the management, but I don't think LEAs and don't have.
And there is a difference. Talk about this. I appreciate you pointing that out because LEAs can hire their own athletic directors and pay them from their, per pupil funding. And they are tied to that particular school or LEA, so to speak. And then with the DCIAA, because they're not tied to anyone particular, they may be funded another way. The DCIAA.
Yeah, I just asked that we make sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll email the person who's in charge of the DCIA as much as.
Right. Exactly.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right, thank you, Representative Jay.
Yep, I'll get that amendment done and circulate it.
And we're going to vote to then put this on the agenda now,
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's good point, yeah. Let's go.
because I support having it on the agenda. And then we can work with these technical changes.
So now we'll entertain,
But for all the things to go on the public meeting agenda, you all have to vote on that. So it's a motion to move the item, whatever it is, and move the title to the public meeting agenda, and move the second, and then members may vote.
so as a parliamentarian taught us the other night, as I asked questions to Director Butler. I'll now entertain a motion, to add to the agenda, go back real quick, calling for, SR 25-8, calling for public funding for the Public Charter School Athletic Association as presented by Representative Ting. Okay, so. Been properly moved by Williams and seconded by Johnson Law. All in favor? Any abstentions? Thank you, it passes on the agenda. Thank you very much. Now we're going to be talking about SR 25-9, calling for changes to compulsory public school attendance and enrollment requirements in DC. I'm coming to Representative Boulay.
Thank you, President Patterson. So I've circulated the revised resolution here, and then we'll get to the legislation after that. I want to talk about some of the changes that we've made. I spoke with all the members in the aftermath of the meeting, just to try to get feedback on what, if any, concerns they had, and then also to address the concerns that were raised in the letter by the executive branch. So I want to talk about what those are right now. One issue that OSSI asked for clarification on was the issue of whether or not they expressly prohibited two-year-olds from joining private pre-K. And I want to kind of add clarity to that. I think we fixed that issue in the resolution. So the issue isn't if you are 2 years old, for example, and you have a birthday in September. Nothing OSSI does per se prohibits that youth from joining a pre-K 3 facility. What has to happen though is pre-K facilities are licensed based on the age that's on their license. So a facility has to, for pre-K 3, request that they also serve 2-year-olds. Now they can serve kids as low as 2.5 in that case, and not have to add additional staffing or retrofit the facility for additional resources. Some have not done that though. So what you'll often see happen is if you have a facility that offers pre-K 3 and 4, they will just license for 3, 4, and 5 historically. And so if you have your pre-K 3, you'll have 3-year-olds who turn 4, pre-K 4, 4-year-olds who turn 5, but they don't try to capture that 2.5 bracket. And I spoke with facility directors in Ward 3 about this, who are private facilities, and they said, you know, they were caught by surprise by the change in policy. They've always relied on DCMR and the discretion of the facilities to assess the children. Now, it seems like DCPS wants to take a more active role in assessing children. I think that's a little bit more complicated when you don't have the pre-K 3 in the public and public charter schools. But the one clarification I wanted to have here was that what we're trying to advocate for is more collaboration between OSSI and facilities, without saying that they're prohibited right now, because the only thing that really prohibits them is what they're licensed for. And that's a choice they can make, but they need to just know to make that change. And I think they were caught by surprise on it, as a number of directors indicated to me. So that's something that can be worked out over the next 2 years without a problem, but I think that's a fair clarification to make. The one thing I did not address, because I still disagree with it, but we've solved it a different way, was like the risk of 8-year-olds joining a pre-K facility, because a pre-K facility is obviously licensed based on the age of the children. So that seemed to be kind of a twofold argument, that the one, somehow they would be licensed there, which I didn't agree with, but also that they could then sneak in under the definition of changing school. So we had in there that we were adding private or parochial schools to the definition to avoid frivolous reports of families to CFSA. I think OSSI had pushed back and spoke with a number of my colleagues. I think they also felt concerned that on an emergency basis, changing that definition might be a bad idea. And then we might want to hear from Aussie and from more people on that. So rather than change the definition, I'll show when we get to the legislation. We just did a carve out for these next 2 years for those families, because I think it was important to Representative Best, and you raised this with me. As we look at the issue long-term on this, of how do we do exceptions for kids with developmental delays? I think one thing we probably will want to do after we talk to experts is distinguish between play-based pre-K4 versus like a more rigorous pre-K4. And what we may want to do is something kind of similar but different from what Maryland does, is to have, if you want to defer due to some sort of educational delay, then you've got to defer to the pre-K4 that's got the educational component with it, not just play-based. So that may be something that we want to think through. I think that's way too much to try to bite off in an emergency bill, because all we're really looking to do is not have families miss out on kindergarten here. But that's the type of thing I would love to work with the committee on and really think through, talking with some of the best experts, because we've got those people here in the city right now. So those changes, I think Aussie, I mean, I pushed back on them, I think for good reason, but I think they had some good points too. I think, and we've clarified those issues in this resolution. If additional clarity is ever needed, we'll be glad to keep an open mind about it. And I just talked about the other significant change that we made to this, which is reflected here and then also in the bill, is we do not change the definition of an educational facility for truancy anymore. We just created a temporary exception to that, so parents aren't impacted. The one thing I did add to this are two smaller issues, which impact very few parents, but were raised by parents who read the newsletter on this issue. And they said there was another serious DCPS notice issue where DCPS actually in one case provided wrong information. And this was on students who are, if they're in boundary and they move. So like, let's say, and I'll give this specific example, it's at Oyster. So we had families that Oyster's boundary is very unique. It's about the size of a postage stamp, but there's a very large out of boundary there. It's just a very small in boundary population. If a family moves out of boundary during the school year at Oyster, which for those not familiar, Oyster Adams goes, the elementary school directly into the middle school. Then what DCPS is now saying is they don't have feeder rights to the next school. So if you're in boundary, I don't agree with this policy. I will say, I think to treat in boundary and out of boundary applicants differently here, I don't think makes sense. What DCPS appears to be trying to avoid is people form shopping, like they go rent an apartment in, let's say, the Jackson Reed feeder, and then they move back out. I don't think that that's a serious issue, but I want to learn more about it. The problem in this case was nobody knew about the policy. And when they asked the school put in writing that you don't need to apply for the lottery because you'll go to Jackson Reed next year. The issue, I think this individual, Amy, reached out to a number of members here. And the issue simply was that she could have easily applied for the lottery, as could have another family, and gone to Jackson Reed. But the problem was DCPS told them don't apply. And because they had sibling preference there and would have easily gotten in because of that. So it was a miscommunication. Unfortunately, it's kind of the same issue with kindergartners. Rather than just acknowledge that there was a miscommunication with parents and then say, we'll grant an exception, they said no exception. So that to me doesn't make sense. On this one, since it was just a very discreet miscommunication, I didn't do 2 years on this. I just did 1 year for the exception. But I think it's still important to correct. And then lastly, it was the same thing with sibling preferences for students graduating from Hardy. This is something I spoke with Councilmember Freeman's office about. It was raised where families who were going to Hardy were told they get sibling preference if they had siblings in Jackson Reed. They would be able to pick between MacArthur and Jackson Reed. A lot of these could have been applied through the lottery to get that, but then we're told, no, it's already guaranteed, and it wasn't guaranteed. So I think the general theme I've tried to shift from on this, I still have deep concerns about reporting families to CFSA for educational neglect when they're in a pre-K program right now. I don't think that's appropriate, but I tried to shift the focus from that to just saying, we really have a notice issue here that I think everybody should acknowledge there was not proper notice to families on this, in some cases, direct miscommunication. So we just want to address this in the short term. Look at a 2-year solution on the kindergarten issue for obvious reasons, 2 years, because people have already enrolled in those classes, put down deposits for next year, so they can't change that now. But we want to make sure that they still can go to kindergarten next year. I don't want to do 2 years on the other two issues because, there can be a shorter fix on that. But I tried to, I think as best we can, be responsive to DCPS, and I will say that when we move this, I'm completely open to more suggestions from them. What I just want to be clear on is I just feel strongly every student has a right to attend kindergarten fundamentally. It's a grade all of us probably still remember if we went to it. And it'll just really traumatize these kids to miss out on something that they are looking forward to. And there's really no issue from the family. Last point I want to address, because it was raised in the letter, is the idea that somehow there's a disproportional impact on lower income students or minority students from this, because these families are redshirting in. That was like an allegation that potentially they're trying to do this to gain an upper hand. Now, I spoke with facility directors on this, and knowing the family situations, which I'm going to go through in a second, that is not what the families are doing here. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. And these are really students with developmental delays who are just trying to stay on pace with their peers. So I get the overall picture. That's something we certainly want to look at with the permanent legislation. I don't think there should be a wide track for kindergarten of 24 months or something like that. But I do think it was raised by them, so I wanted to address it. Lastly, I want to get to what Representative Williams and I had talked about. I spoke with the families, specifically asked them for stories, individual stories on this, because I think that is important. I think people, I will say this, are extremely nervous right now because school is still in session and there have been threats made to report them to Child and Family Services for truancy. So until school's over, I think you still see extreme nervousness about telling individual stories. Now, with that said, though, I do have stories that I will read of cases, but the parents have taken the names out, the schools out, to not provide that identifying information in case there's retaliation from DCPS against those families. But when we get to the legislation, I'll be glad to read that and then show how it fits in with the provisions of legislation. So I would like to then just move the resolution as amended here. We've made those amendments, and I'll be open to answer any questions.
So, and I'm trying to make sure that I understand, I mean, I really don't get a vote, so I'm just trying to make sure I understand. So there are students with developmental delays who are in private pre-K who will be joining the public school system in the upcoming year. And so as a part of that, have those students been assessed by DCPS in like early stages or any of those programs which they use to assess students before school starts to make sure that they have the appropriate accommodations? Because I know of other families that have had that happen before their kid is like officially enrolled. Have those type of things happen to like get additional paperwork or to get that information?
That's an excellent question. And I will give you an example. One of my examples here of a family. This is one I've actually spoken to personally and know quite well. I'm going to make sure I don't provide identifying information. But there was a family at an elementary school that had specifically worked with DCPS. It got approval from the principal, talked to the educators that served the child, and then developmental experts. Everyone had agreed that this student, and the student was assessed for all those issues. Everyone agreed that the student this year should repeat pre-K4 and that they should not advance to kindergarten this year, even though their birthday was mid-September and they were eligible for kindergarten. There was unanimity that the student should wait and do kindergarten the year after because they weren't ready. So
This is like an official like IEP or 504.
it's not an IEP. It was just using the discretion in the DCMR that's always been there to identify where this student should go in terms of, because what disappoints me on this is that DCMR, this has never been a problem before because DCMR provides guidance on the promotion of students. They've got to be proficient to advance. And I don't like that we just seem to be jettisoning what is really advised in DCMR and recommended, and I think some would argue required of DCPS to do, which is to assess proficiency in advancing students. So they didn't do that. They did do that process, and they said the student should do pre-K 4 this year. Then the student enrolled in kindergarten, and the administration at Central said, we're striking that down. They have to go to first grade. That assessment is now void. They're going to first grade, and we'll assess them in the fall. And if they struggle in the fall, we'll demote them back down to kindergarten. So they've ignored the expert, the principal, and everyone who's assessed the student. And just based on an arbitrary age cap, which has never been the guidance before, they've told this family, you got to skip kindergarten and you got to go to first grade. It makes no sense to me. I don't know why they're doing it. And it's, I mean, that's one of the examples. And I'll be glad to read others here.
I was just asking what was the plan, what was, I know
Representative Johnson Law.
that Representative Thompson's also.
Yeah.
I wanted to, thank you, Director Butler, I wanted to expand, on what you were saying and to have clarification. So Eric, under IDEA, under Part C, like,
Yeah.
you know, when we're identifying if a child, for them to be able to get early intervention services.
Yeah.
So are these families that are getting early intervention services that are being provided by like a private provider?
Yeah.
Or is it that they went through like early stages and others, right, through like government assessments, and they disagreed, and then they did their own, because you can do an independent evaluation. It's an IEE. So is this what the families did, or, because I'm trying to figure out, like, because there are like intervention services for children who are from basically birth to 3. And so I'm trying to figure out, were these families involved in that process under IDEA, under basically Strong Start? And under those, because they have like a plethora of providers, was it one of those providers and they didn't like it, so they went somewhere else? Or is it something where it's like they didn't go through that at all and they just went to their own, you know, like their own doctor or provider or something of that nature?
Well, I think it's a great question. It brings up the challenge we have in Ward 3. I know it also exists in Ward 2 and 4 with a couple schools, but it's the lack of pre-K 3 in schools. So in Ward 3, we have no pre-K 3 in any of our schools, whereas across the city, kids can get into pre-K 3 and be assessed. What I'm really curious about, and I think we should look at in the long term, is how is this assessment process working where you do have pre-K 3? And I think it's happening exactly the way you're talking about it, where kids are getting in pre-K 3, being assessed, and then maybe if they're determined by DCPS not to be ready for kindergarten, I think what's been happening, and actually in a logical way, is they've been being held back by principals and teachers and put in the right grade based on proficiency.
So is the assessment you're not ready for pre-K 3, or is the assessment you have a qualifying federally recognized disability?
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think in most cases it goes to the level of an IEP in this.
Or a 504?
I think a lot of, or 504, I think a lot of it is like the maturity of the child. You know, we looked at some of these issues. I think they could rise to the issue of an IEP if the parents decide to pursue that. I think what they've tried to do instead is track the child with the developmental stage based upon where their progress is, you know, based on DCMR. And what I would hope, you know, we should do, and what we've always done, is we've trusted that, since we don't have pre-K 3 in schools, we've trusted the private pre-Ks to do those assessments, because that's where the kids track through. And then they've assessed the kids into the right grades based on their interpretation of the youth's development. And I have no reason to think that any of this, because I've looked at the individual cases, any of this is related to trying to redshirt. I think it's that the kid wasn't ready. And then DCPS has always in the past relied on that facility's assessment of the kid's progress, and then just track them into the next grade when they've applied for DCPS at the K level. There's never been an issue where a student graduating from pre-K 4 who's been assessed at that grade by a private pre-K facility is then second guessed and then advanced a full year when you get to DCPS. I think that if we're trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist, I mean, I feel like that's what we're doing with this. But if we do want to solve it, all we need to do is work with those private facilities to align enrollment criteria. And then have a really serious discussion though, about who does the assessment, because what's missing from all this is who assesses a child and puts them in the right slot when they're considering pre-K 3. Is DCPS gonna be doing that? Is it gonna be OSSI? Is it gonna be the private pre-K facility? And then there's gotta be some level of trust, like there is in every other state, because this is what DCPS is recommending. It's not done anywhere else in the country. Like we not only have the latest kindergarten enrollment date, so we have the youngest kids in kindergarten. What they're proposing here exists nowhere with exceptions. So there are, in Virginia, for example, to defer a year, all you need is a note from a physician, like a pediatrician, or the school that they're going to. So if they're in a private pre-K 3 or in a Head Start program, just a letter from that facility saying this kid's not ready for kindergarten yet, wait a year. In Maryland, it's a little bit stricter, and that's what I was just talking there. You got to have the kid enrolled in a approved academic program to get the waiver. So DCPS is basically saying no waiver, which is to me, I mean, just doesn't make any sense when you have the latest compulsory date in the country for this. And I think there's a lot that can be done to do this easily. It just requires communication. So, you know, in a determination, are we going to trust the private pre-K's assessment? Is DCPS going to go assess every kid who enrolls in private pre-K and says that's not the right spot for them? And I don't think that's helpful, but it's something we can discuss. Like if they want to do that, let's do it, but let's talk it through.
Representative Williams.
Thompson, then me, then.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. Go right ahead, Representative Thompson.
Representative Thompson.
Hello.
Hey, I think I have a comment and a question. So I appreciate the I guess the in Representative Goulet's words, the call out that we're trying to solve a problem that ideally doesn't exist. I think one of the things that I had not thought about before earlier today was the possibility of working with the private pre-Ks to align to the same start date. I think that matters a lot, which actually then gets into my question. My question is, we discussed at last month's working session, certain steps being taken to correspond with other agencies. And I know, Representative Goulet, that you noted that you had started to draft a letter, and I definitely understand both your frustration and you know, the push from the parents, and why at this juncture you in particular are saying you don't have a lot of confidence. But I am also curious if we as a board, and maybe this is a question for the leadership, ever took the steps to reach out to the other agencies, again, given Representative Goulet's statement that, you know, ideally legislation is not necessary in this regard. And so I'm looking for what have we done before this point, or what have we done since, from the leadership perspective, because I know that sometimes they're privy to conversations that we are not. And I would hope if we have not had those conversations, or that we can add to those conversations at this point around alignment, because I don't think a reasonable solution is like we just go assess, you know, every private pre-K. But I do think ideally long-term alignment is a much better solution.
I just want to respond to your comment, and then obviously leadership may want to speak as well. I do want to thank President Patterson for meeting with the schools and leadership, and also to Representative Vice President Williams for having those meetings. So I appreciate that that's been done. I think it was useful that you did it. You know, for me, the problem is at this point, I do think a legislative solution is absolutely essential. I think the reason is they simply refuse to assess the children now. They refuse to change their mind. And even if they assess the children, the problem still is these children deserve to be able to go to kindergarten right now. If they want to start doing assessments ahead of time, there needs to be notice to parents that these assessments are going to be occurring. There needs to be the type of notice where there's no way that the parent is going to make a decision if they say a child is ready, but if they go to pre-K4, you're going to miss kindergarten. As the parents testified to, they're going to then go to kindergarten if that's the path that creates kindergarten opportunities for their child. So I think we have done everything we can try to do to work in good faith on this. I really appreciate our board leadership for going back, having those communications with them, expressing our point of view, I think very explicitly. And I just think at this point, we do need legislation, and we specifically need legislation to grant exceptions at this point, because DCPS has made it clear these families are not going to be going to kindergarten next year. They will be going to first grade, and if they don't go to first grade, if they do go to first grade and they struggle, they'll be demoted, which that makes absolutely no sense to me. And then further, we also need legislation to protect our families, because I've heard more instances of DCPS staff threatening families with CFSA referrals. And that to me is the thing that's bothered me the most on this, is I attended the CFSA hearing. I heard the testimony about the lack of resources to meet all the needs of truly abused and neglected kids in our city. And so the fact that we are taking families who have their kids in a 5-day-a-week pre-K program and reporting them for child neglect makes absolutely no sense at all. I don't think it's done in good faith, and I'll reiterate that. And I think that needs to be stopped as well, because the chancellor himself, in the email he sent back to the board, said he feels he has no choice but to do that. He defended the actions of his staff and said DCPS is a mandatory reporter, and they must report children who have kids in pre-K4 to CFSA under the law. So what we're doing is changing the law for the next 2 years to make sure the chancellor, if he's confused about this, make sure he understands we don't need to report families for child neglect.
And Representative Thompson, I want to make sure that you can respond to that if you need me, or as I point to Representative Best.
No, I don't think that answered my question at all. I totally appreciate Representative Goulet's stance on, the referrals and all the things. I think what I'm explicitly asking is if there were meetings with OSSI and the chancellor about this and what the response was. Because those were steps we agreed to take. I'm specifically asking about those things because not just as a casual, not just as a courtesy, I'm asking because I do want to see a remedy for these families. And Representative Goulet knows that I've shared with him that I believe that is a really important step in getting a resolution for these families more quickly. And so that is why I'm asking. So specifically, have those conversations happened? Have there been conversations? Has there been correspondence around that? And what were the responses?
So I'll respond to some of that, Representative Thompson. So first, there have been conversations concerning setting up meetings, which was stated, I believe, last month, which we talked about sending a letter basically over to both the chancellor and to our superintendent to have, those particular conversations. And we were going to do them in a kind of a sequence type of way to make sure that both the temperature of the conversations could be had and everything. So yes, that was actually done. Director Butler reached out to those offices. And then there were conversations that were also had. I had one personally with the chancellor regarding this. There was a pretty lengthy conversation. He walked me through the conversations that he had had with particular families and everything like that. And he was like, I'm not totally open to a conversation where I've met with the families. I feel like we're kind of like talking in circles, is the way I'll say it. They basically understand where we are. And so we did not go forward with an actual meeting after having an offline conversation. And they didn't seem receptive to scheduling those meetings. So that's what has occurred.
And did we have a meeting or with OSSI or correspondence with OSSI?
Well, the letter went to both of them, and then we had conversations, like offline conversations. The letter went to both of them, and they both were not receptive to having it.
So you say the letter, so what I recall from our last correspondence was Eric wrote a letter. Eric then said, I, wrote it late. I don't know what happened to it. I don't know if it was sent to the board. I know I, as a board member, was not asked to sign on to a letter that went to the agencies. And so is that what we're referencing?
Not, so we sent an email request immediately following last month's public meeting to all of the parties included, Office of the Superintendent, to the Chancellor, to the DMV. And the only correspondence we got back regarding that meeting was, follow-up from State Superintendent Mitchell said that if a meeting would occur, they should attend. There was zero correspondence back or acknowledgement of receipt. And I called to make sure it was received. People did not respond back. I do think people probably did not want to respond back to a meeting request after what happened at the public meeting, but I also don't know what they were thinking. So we did send the email, and the only thing we got back was from Superintendent Mitchell that says that she would be willing to meet if there was a meeting that was like a collective meeting.
And as I've said, I spoke to the Chancellor at length about the possibility of having that particular meeting or responding to the email that was sent, and he was not receptive.
And just briefly, like on the issue of OSSI here, is we don't need OSSI to take any action on this. Like long term, yes, I think it'd be very valuable to work with OSSI to address issues of who's assessing children in private facilities, how we align those dates under the licenses, just working with the facilities and notifying them. But this decision right now is within the Chancellor's purview to continue to inform his principals, to tell them to use DCMR, which they were doing anyways. And I think the biggest issue here really is notice. These parents had no notice. So why, I will not understand why the Chancellor and DCPS wants to disadvantage them when they had no notice of this policy change, which is a significant change. The facilities had no idea of this policy change, because when I talked to the facilities, they said, if we knew that this longstanding policy of tracking kids to the next grade was going to be changed, we would have let people enrolling in the school know and changed our eligibility years. So that's really the issue here. It's more to me about even notice than anything else, because I think there's all sorts of policy discussions we should have about what makes sense in the long term. But right now, what I wish DCPS would do, and I think you have really expressed that to them as clearly as they can, is grant exceptions based on the obvious communication problems on this for now. We can have all sorts of good discussions. And what I want to really be real clear about is if they're annoyed with me for being forceful about this, I am equally annoyed with them. I've now testified at 3 hearings, asking them to be investigated by OIG, OAG, and the auditor, because I do not believe for 1 second that we should be reporting children and families to our Child Protective Services Division when we know those children are enrolled in pre-K4. That is something that would not happen anywhere in the country. It shouldn't happen here. And it is traumatizing towards families. And I believe it's retaliatory. And I'm not going to get over that, but I want to move on this issue.
And I want us to keep us moving, so we're
Yeah.
gonna do the best.
Thank you. Eric, I appreciate, the, not like full pivot, like the pivot.
Yeah.
A little bit, because I do think that part of the main crux of this issue is the play-based versus, educational pre-K settings. But even more so, communication around what it means that if you are enrolled in these schools or these play-based programs, if your child falls within a certain age range. And I think that is the thing that's very important for us to understand right now, is that most of the families that we heard said, if I knew, I would have enrolled my child in blank. And I think that is a challenge that we need to address. And as someone who's spent my entire career in family engagement, I think that it is important that we are engaging our families around this, but we're also connecting with these play-based programs to ensure that they are also spreading that information to families and letting them know prior to enrolling that this is what this means. And so I do think that if possible, and I hope that we can, connect with DCPS to see if we could get this temporary exemption while we work on putting the systems and structures in place to ensure that we've come up with a long-term solution to the problem that we have. So this isn't a threat. This is me reaching out, olive branch to our leaders at DCPS to see if we can come to a long-term solution that honestly, right now, I don't think that we would be able to make, I don't think it would be a fruitful long-term solution if we were to do something just like right now. But I do think that if we put these proper systems in place and work with both these play-based programs and communicate with our families, that we can come up with a solution to this problem. And it's frustrating because I also, like you, Eric, I've been speaking to parents now, and I understand where the challenge comes in. I don't think that there is like, a big bad in this scenario. I do think that there are some challenges as it relates to understanding what constitutes an educational entity versus what doesn't. Do I believe that those families should be reported to CPS? No, but I also think that there should be proper information so that parents can make informed decisions about the schools that their kids go to. And so I'll leave it at that. But I do appreciate your switch. I know we had that convo, and I appreciate the switch that you're going in and thinking to see if we can get some type of temporary exemption for those families that are there. And I don't know if you said a year or 2 years, whichever one. It provides us with some leeway to make this thing right, because there's a gap.
Right.
Thank you.
All right, I appreciate that, and I do want to keep up with what you spent quite a bit of time here. We'll come to Representative Williams. For people.
I have a variety. I think, Eric, I appreciate your ability to advocate for these families. And all of us are in that same boat, and I also have a variety of oyster families that have been impacted, so I appreciate you adding amendments F and E, which you directly address those situations. I also appreciate the feedback to kind of focus on a more short-term approach, given our bandwidth and the urgency of this issue, and to avoid the educational institution piece as the key definition that was more of a misdemeanor. To me, like, I think the resolution itself kind of buries the problem. I think at the end of the first resolution, line 40 to 42, right, this miscommunication and this inconsistent communication that has been documented, created these problems. And I think there was a variety of additional approaches to do so. I think that where we are now, I am curious. President Patterson, I know you had spoken with Achento. Do you think that a particular letter asking them to make these exceptions as opposed to proposing complete legislation could be something, or should be something that we still do?
I'm open.
Because to Representative Thompson's point, like, we did commit to doing that two meetings ago, and that still has not been done.
I'm open to that.
Wait, you all haven't reached out to DCPS, I thought you all did that.
Yeah.
We did reach out.
There's no letter.
There was no letter.
Oh, okay,
Man, I just, yeah, and I did, so. First, I obviously want these on the agenda so we can continue those communications. I think they can be fruitful. I think the one thing I want to emphasize with any sort of letter like that is it's got to be, if they're willing to make exceptions, I don't want them just going case by case on this. And here's the reason why. Is because I only know about a certain number of these families. Some people have really been frightened by threats. So some people were threatened into enrolling in first grade and didn't even know they could come to anybody to talk about it. Other people just don't know who to talk to here. They could have moved in from another state. I had a family moving from another state that was impacted by this, went through a horrific experience. And that could happen in any ward of the city. And we may not even be aware that that occurred. So the legislation, which I can get to when we get there, talks about DCPS also sending out revised notice to families. And if there's any agreement from the chancellor, it's got to include that. So it's not just assessing a list of families we give him, because that may not be the universe. They need to inform families of this option if they have not attended kindergarten, if they're under the age of 6, to enroll in kindergarten. I mean, that communication's got to go out because there's been a lot of communication of the contrary, and we can't only help families that know they can come to us. We have to help all families, and that's what I want to do. So if we pursue that, let's just make sure that the commitment to outreach to everybody is in there, and the commitment to a waiver for any kid that hasn't attended kindergarten, not just case by case.
Representative Henderson.
I'll be brief, but I do want to say I appreciate the shift. That's best described, which does take away my concern about the definition of institution. I appreciate just looking at it as a short-term solution at this point. And where I kind of landed, and I agree that I don't think that we have to have these policies, and it's fine if we have these policies, but we do need to be clear and consistent. And what I've found in so many of the cases is the miscommunication that families receive communication from some official, usually a principal, and then made decisions and plans based on that, and now are having the rug pulled from under them. And I do think we need to correct that in all the cases that has come up, including Mr. Peter patterns. So if there's a communication that's happening from TCPS, we need to honor it, and think that this proposal does ensure that in the short term, and then we need to just be consistent so that that kind of miscommunication doesn't happen.
I know we're running short, but just address Representative Williams' first point actually that you made, and that was that perhaps we should reorder it the whereases. I think we have the ability to do that. I mean, we're voting to put this on the agenda. We'll have it on SharePoint, so and it'll be open to everybody. So if people would like to move things around in order that it flows better, I'm fully supportive of that. I'm supportive of changes that you think strengthen the resolution and improve tone, whatever we do. I mean, we always have the ability to make those amendments after this, and I'm certainly open to that. I think that's a great idea by our vice president to potentially put that right up front on the notice issue.
I appreciate that. So with that being said, I'm gonna kind of close discussion because it's been quite lengthy. And entertain a motion that we put on the agenda SR 45-9.
So moved.
So moved. I was gonna read the whole title, but
Okay.
Calling for changes to compulsory public school attendance and enrollment requirements at DC as presented by Representative Boulay. It has been moved by Representative Boulay. Is there a second? Second. It's probably second by Representative Best. All in favor? Aye. Any nays? Abstentions? It carries. Will be on the agenda. All right, we're gonna move to SR 25-10. Supporting the expansion of Shirley Chisholm's Elementary School into a dual language education campus, and I'm coming to Representative Best, Board 6.
Can I just ask a point of clarity? Did we just moved one of the four right now?
You only move the resolution.
Right.
Okay,
The resolution.
so is this between them?
Yes.
Oh, okay, I apologize.
No, yeah.
I don't have the agenda in front of me. I'm sorry.
Go right down to
There we go. I have too much paper. I apologize.
Representative Best.
Yeah, just moving forward, put it on the meeting agenda
The resolution supports, expanding Shirley Chisholm Elementary to a dual, language education campus by adding middle school during its 2026 modernization. Currently, there's no DCPS dual language, school on this side of town, forcing many families to either leave the system or abandon bilingual education altogether. To address this gap and support the continuity for bilingual learners, our bilingual education resolution calls for DCPS to include this into the expansion, into the modernization plan, allocating for for the modernization plan, while also looking into a feasibility study and to engage the Shirley Chisholm community in this process as well. Yes.
Representative Chang?
Who is against this and why?
Great question, sir.
Well, I think part of the challenge, well, I think right now, part of the challenge, we're looking at the budget. Another part of the challenge is, I think people are just getting, from my conversations with families, people are just becoming aware of it, and it's picking up steam. But it's still not quite there where they're like, you know what, absolutely, let's make this happen. And so the families have been arguing for this for a while, advocating for this for a while. And earlier on, they had a couple meetings and the conversations went well, but it didn't move the needle necessarily. And so the goal, I think their goal is to see if we can support and then try to build momentum also from this to for further advocacy efforts.
Right. I'm now going to come to Representative Mullane, then I'll come to you. And Representative Thompson is also in the queue.
I just want to speak wholeheartedly in support of this, and I just go back to the Oyster situation that I'm dealing with when I hear from parents. We have a bilingual school with Oyster, whose students want to be able to continue that same coursework, and it's not offered. I'm sorry, at Jackson Reed, it's not offered at MacArthur. So like, DCPS really needs to be thoughtful about creating tracks of learning where students who pick up these skills and these talents can continue them onward. I think what is being proposed here is not only reasonable, but just we should be trying to build upon it and do it everywhere where there's a track that if you learn a skill in DCPS, that the system has made a pathway where you can achieve greatness in that, all the way up to AP achievement. So I was really excited you brought this forward, was excited to support it in committee, and I hope we can get it funded. I think it makes so much sense. So thank you for raising it.
Appreciate it, Representative Henderson.
Yeah, I'd just say I appreciate the your approach to this resolution. Also, it's consistent with the goals that the DME has stated in the student assignment and boundaries committee, and as part of a broader effort to ensure a more equitable distribution of language opportunities. I hope this would be step one in that, opening another opportunity that could have more those.
Thank you. Before I go, any others? Thompson, I'm so sorry, Representative Thompson. Representative Thompson.
Representative Chang, you said who's against this and why. I think it's not a matter of folks not wanting something for Chisholm, but I do, and we had a conversation about this at our last Ward 7 Education Council meeting, because we have several dual language schools in Ward 7, Houston, Stokes, Global Citizens, and they have been in contact with the Chisholm parents. I do think there is some concern about the language that this serves east of the city, because what they have been asking for is actually a school in their own community. And so it's not that they don't want the Chisholm parents to have, but I would feel comfortable saying, because it was said there, that it might be a stretch to say that they as in parents are in favor of this particular location. And so I think it's just a question of who gets what first, which is always the question. But there is a push that exists from folks who I know are in Ward 7 who want a middle school and want a dual language middle school in particular in their community, not another community, because we travel the greatest distances for any education, period. And so that would be the reason why, not.
I think also, Representative Thompson, I do hear you. But I also think that part of the reason why this was brought up was because of the unique nature of the timing of it all. And going into their modernization. So as they're modernizing, it's not that, you know, the parents are just out of the blue saying, you know what, we want an educational campus. But they're saying that we have this unique opportunity right now to fix a problem or a gap that we're seeing in the schools or here at DCPS, where there is no potential for them to continue with this feeder pattern for dual language, where we could create an opportunity for it right now as we're looking into the modernization. So I do think that it is mostly because of the timing of it all, where it just makes sense to continue with that.
Yeah, I'm not, I want to be really clear. I'm not diminishing their argument in any way. I'm more so answering the question of why someone would be opposed to this, and just noting that it is not about their argument or not wanting something for other children. It's because people do want certain things for themselves. We had the same conversation when MacArthur was open. And it was like, hey, there's a building here, you know, we should open another building. But then there were also folks who were like, well, we should build things in children's communities. And so I totally understand. I'm not even asking folks to vote this down, but I am answering the question directly of why folks would be opposed to this, and just giving voice to that as a representative for communities who, you know, would be opposed to this.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll end discussion with saying that I'm supportive of this particular resolution. I do have a family member who did attend Shirley Chisholm before it became Shirley Chisholm. And after getting all of that nice dual language, as she matriculated into middle school, she could not go to a school that well, she had applied to school, but she ended up going to James, Pacific School. It would have been nice if she could have went to another dual language school and continued that. So that was something that I looked at from a family perspective. So I can relate to the families that are speaking about it in that sense. So I'm supportive of it and look forward to putting it on the agenda. And with that being said, I will now take a motion to move SR 25-10, supporting the expansion of Shirley Chisholm Elementary School into a dual language educational campus. Do I have a motion? So moved by Representative Best. Do I have a second?
Second.
It has been properly second. I believe Johnson Law beat Goulet to second. So all in favor? Any nays? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Abstained by Representative Thompson. It carries and it will go to on the agenda. Thank you so much. Okay, now, again, I love the debates, but let's try to be succinct. Okay, so I'm now coming back to Representative Goulet. Let's do this attend kindergarten emergency declaration resolution of 2025.
So I'll be extremely quick on this one. So this one is, we do have to move an amendment to it, but it's an obvious amendment. So this is the one that came out of committee. We just have to move it to now correspond with what we just voted on for the resolution, because the declaration resolution is the same as our resolution. So I will move this one as amended by the action we just took on our resolution. So moved with once you.
Once
yes,
I do that.
Do it, but I have no further comments because this will be identical to what we just voted on, if that makes sense. So I know you have to move it.
I appreciate that in the class that we just take, following the class that you so happily put together for us. Real quick before I move it, or ask for a motion, is there any other comments? Okay, That's nice of everyone. I appreciate that. With that being said, I will now entertain a motion to, entertain, let students attend kindergarten emergency declaration resolution of 2025. Is there a motion?
Yes, as amended,
As
the
amended.
changes we just took on the other one, so moved.
As all of that, I appreciate that. It has been moved by Representative Boulay, and seconded.
Second.
It has probably been seconded by Johnson Law. All in favor?
For discussion.
Okay.
Well, I'm just talking about the process. I mean, I understand. We did training for a reason, right? Like, Eric, can you speak to why in part E, there's the May 31st piece?
Sorry, are you speaking of, I think you're thinking of the acts here, so this here?
Yeah.
So this is on the acts, so this is the changes to DC code, so we'll take that one up next. The resolution, what we're doing is just porting over the resolution we passed this board into the template we have for the
I'm ahead.
for the resolution. Yeah, so you're on the next
I
one.
love it.
But I just want to make sure we capture the changes we just
Yeah.
approved into the what we circulated earlier from committee. Does that make sense?
You good, Vice President?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So F, let students attend kindergarten emergency declaration resolution as amended.
Yes, I'll work with you to get the technical changes. For sure.
It has been moved. It has been seconded. All in favor? Any abstentions?
I abstain.
Abstentions? There's any nays?
I also abstain.
Okay, for Representative Thompson and Representative Williams abstain. The motion here. All in favor? Okay, I'll read it. It carries. Okay. Now we have. Okay, so I guess we have a sheet now.
And
Let students attend kindergarten, Emergency Act of 2025. Emergency Amendment Act of 2025.
so, may I be right?
You are recognized, Representative.
So if everyone can take this out, because this is the cheat sheet to this, this is the, what they call comparative print council. It basically takes the DC code and shows you the changes to the DC code in red box. This is in your folder, it's got a lot of red box. So, what we'll see here is, the major change that we made, we talked about earlier, and I'll be brief with this, is, 38202A is where we made these amendments to first one. What we did is we changed the definition of school in here. Before this year, students that were attending private schools were always thought of to be in regular attendance. What OSCE objected to, they said, is by changing this to add private parochial pre-K schools to this, that could somehow then create an opening where like if there was a private program, students of any age could enter that. So what we did is we want to leave this definition alone. So the easier way to do it is just simply do a notwithstanding clause for these 2 years, so that we don't have to change the definition, but we make sure people aren't reported to CFSA. So this is in the section of the code on truancy. It does not change the definition of an educational institution. It just makes clear the following individuals will not be reported to Child Protective Services. One is a minor who's living in another state, could not enroll in kindergarten because that state's deadline was earlier, and then moves into DC after the school year starts, and then wants to start kindergarten next year. They would not be reported for truancy. I think that it's always been common sense. Previously, that family was given the option to do kindergarten or first grade. But this just makes it clear that family does not have to worry about being in protective services. And that's actually a real case because they threatened a family that they would report their child to protective services, and the family moved the kid who was in DC back to the home state to avoid the risk of the child being reported to CFSA. I find it appalling, but I'll leave it there. The second category of students this deals with is any minor who is younger than 6. So I want to make clear this is not some long-term exemption. You can't have 8-year-olds saying that they're in pre-K 4. So any minor younger than the age of 6, which means they haven't turned 6 by the time school lets out. If they're enrolled in a public, private, or parochial 5-day-a-week pre-kindergarten program, they're not considered truant either.
Now, for the permanent, I want to work with Representative Best to get clarification that if you want an exemption and you want to have your kid held off for developmental delays, we got to make sure this is academic-based pre-K. I don't try to tackle that here because it will take time for facilities to develop those capacities. People have already enrolled in certain facilities. So for the next 2 years, because of those commitments, we're not trying to change this, but I really do think there's a lot of value in if people want an academic waiver from kindergarten to delay the kids a year, there's got to be an educational component to that pre-K education. So that's something we can work on later in the permanent bill. So that is what this does. I think it's a good change that we've made because it addresses OSSI's issue and makes sure that this is separate. And I'm glad to consider if they want to come back and say, hey, can you tweak this? I'm glad to work with colleagues here to tweak it before we vote. I think that makes sense. The second change here is to give exemptions to these populations here that we've discussed. So there's E, F, and G, 3 populations. I'll describe each one quickly. For the next 2 school years, we address the kindergarten issue. So any family who has a minor who's not reached the age of 6 before May 31st, because we don't want 19-year-olds graduating from high school. That's a big issue because it makes the kid ineligible for sports. So we make clear that any student can't be held back longer than that. So we have that type of issue. They'll be permitted to enroll in kindergarten to the rest of the parent guard. This is the way it's always been. So we keep the status quo for another 2 years, so we have time to get this right. Number 2 is the issue that I think it was well, you're aware of the individual who emailed about this, Amy. I don't think she is concerned about me mentioning her name here, but this was an issue really where they informed her wrong on taking her family from Oyster. She could have applied through the lottery based on the guidance that she chose not to. There's another family implicated by this, but as I know, it's only 2 families, and they want to continue the coursework they've been taking in terms of advanced languages all the way through up a grade P with their peers and their siblings. So this would allow them to do so, but it only provides the exemption for a year because I don't believe we need a 2-year exemption here. I think we do need to look at the policy of whether or not if you move and you're in boundary, you should be prohibited from enrolling, but that's something we can do outside of this. This just makes sure these families aren't harmed by the miscommunication. And then the last issue here is this issue that I briefly talked with Councilmember Fruman about. This was an issue where previously siblings were given the automatic right to pick between MacArthur and Jackson Creek if they were coming from a Hardy feeder pattern. And it was automatic at that point. You could choose to go with your siblings. Like for the Eaton boundary, for those familiar with Ward 3, Eaton's Cleveland Park area, it's almost impossible if you're trying to get one kid to Jackson Reed and the other to MacArthur to be able to do both. That's going to be a real challenge. So that's why we put siblings in the same schools as each other. This was changed this year. I don't really understand the reasoning why behind that. I think it's probably to make sure enough kids go to MacArthur, but there's got to be notice about this. And if families had known about this, perhaps they would have tried to go through the lottery. They would have made other choices. But again, complete blindside of the families. And I'm willing to work with DCPS on this if they want to talk about it. But the consistent issue on all 3 of these issues, E, F, and G, is advanced communication and making sure people are clear on what's happening and that nobody gets blindsided by either lack of information or wrong information. And that is the extent of it. I have not tried to do anything further with it. It is just literally trying to help these families not be harmed for the next 2 years on the pre-K issue to kindergarten, and then the boundary issues, just 1 year, not 2, because we have time then to work that out. So I'm glad to answer any questions anyone has on this, and I really do thank you all for your time.
Discussion. No discussion? Any questions? I'm not seeing any online as well.
So President Patterson, on this, just like I did on the last one, I will move to amend the versions that came through committee with these changes. So I'll do it as amended based on this, and then I will update the emergency and temporary acts to reflect these changes that we're adopting here.
Yeah, I have one clarifying question. For E, I just want to make sure I'm understanding this right. When you say that a child who has not reached the age of 6 on or before May 31st, why May 31st?
We could pick any date. I know there's a couple of the families that have mid-June birthdays, with kids with developmental delays. So I want to capture all known families in this. I don't think May 31st is the correct date permanently on this. I think we need to have a serious discussion as a city about what is a good date for compulsory education. September 30th, with now the additional focus we place in terms of actually making kindergarten a educational activity versus a play-based activity. In kindergarten, there's a focus on education and learning now that there was not before. I think we need to look if September 30th is the right date, because we are the outlier in the country in terms of making young kids go. So I think on this, I'm not saying May 31st is a permanent date. This just solves the immediate problem of notice. I think we should have a broader discussion about what is the right date for compulsory education,
Right.
and then we fix that.
Given that the intent is to do that conversation at a later date, what if we change the wording to who has not reached the age of 6 on the, like the agreed upon cutoff dates?
Well, I mean, the agreed upon cutoff date would be September 30th, though, so that would disqualify all the families that we're trying to help.
Okay, so do we need a particular date then? As opposed to just putting something arbitrary there?
Well, I mean, we could just say that any family that wants to attend, I mean, I'd be glad to work with you on language that says any family who has not completed kindergarten has a right to enroll. What I was trying to, the reason I put a date in here was not to try to let more families in. It was actually if there was some egregious case of redshirting where a student moves in who's like sat out and has like a February birthday or something, to make sure, because I was more worried about them coming in and saying that February kid should not be in kindergarten. They're obviously ready for first grade at this point, and I didn't want there to be a case where they said that's just redshirting. So I put this date in here to capture all the kids that I know of that have real developmental delays and who've been caught up in this poor communication. I wanted to have a fail-safe so that students who were not victims of poor communication weren't redshirting and taking advantage of the system. Now, we could get rid of it altogether and just put in, if you haven't attended kindergarten, you get to go, and I'm fine to work on that language. But I was trying to actually be more responsive to DCPS's point of making sure we didn't have kids who are too old getting in and having a wide age band. So if you want to work on that amendment and the body's good with it, I'm good with putting that in. Because it actually just expands the universe of eligible kids. It doesn't limit it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to do that. I think, we should be, if we're recommending any change to policy or law, we should not just pick an arbitrary date. I understand that you're trying to make it broad enough to make it a catch-all to, reduce the harm for these particular families that we know about. But without us having a permanent solution, like I want to figure out what that proper language is in the interim.
Yeah.
So like on my school DC date. that is
Well,
fair to-
My school DC date is September 30th. So September 30th.
Outside of September 30th, there's no.
So a lot of states, to answer your question, a lot of states will have a compulsory date and then an eligibility date. So like you're eligible by a certain date. If you choose to wait, you have to go by this time. And, for a lot of those, it's somewhere between September 1st, like the vast majority between September 1st and June 1st. So that's where you see most of them. I don't pretend to know, and I'm not going to try to change the arbitrary date we have right now, June 30th. But it is the latest in the country, tied with Virginia, and Virginia's exception policy is much broader than what we have right now, even under the current DCMR, which they're not following anymore. They're just saying no exception. So I think we need to change that date, but I don't want to tackle it here. I just want to, that's why I separate this out and I don't amend that section.
Yeah, all right. Any other discussion?
Well, I just also just want to say, that's that point, but all of the DCPS, PK3 and PK4 is all play-based. That is how they track, that is how little kids learn. But it is all also academic. So I just want to be clear on the definition. Because that is the curriculum they approved, obviously it's all for the pre-K. 3 and PK4 program, just one standard curriculum, and it is a play-based curriculum. but also with all the academic standards that this board approved, they are PK-12. So there's academics built out through every grade level. There's no place where kids just want to play.
You're talking about the private institutions.
No, what that doesn't apply to them, because
Okay,
they're
no,
private.
that's what
I mean, just like any private school, it wouldn't apply to them. So, but all public charter, or like community-based programs that are licensed for us for PK-3, keep that same curriculum.
And to your point, that's what we want. We want to have pre-K3 in every DCPS school in Ward 3, just like everybody else has.
Well, the curriculum is still the same, even the PK-4 is still the same curriculum, just it's increased for the next age.
If you don't have a class though, it doesn't exist.
They are all over the city.
All right, I appreciate the conversation back and forth. At this particular point, is there any other discussion? Okay, with that being said, we're on to G, so I will take a motion,
President Patterson, may I move, since they're identical resolutions, may I move the two in block, G and H without objection?
is there an objection?
Oh, you have to, I guess, move them in block.
If they're identical, it's just based on the days. Okay.
I'll make sure we have no objection to that. Okay, so I move that we move both G and H, as amended. So that would be, let students attend kindergarten emergency act, 2025, and it would be let students attend emergency kindergarten temporary amendment act of 2025.
So moved.
It's been properly moved by Representative Goulet. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly seconded by Representative Johnson Long from Ward 8. All in favor? Any nays? Any abstentions? Thank you very much for moving those along. Next, we will have, because we took off earlier, so we'll move to J, which is CR 25-3, supporting culture club guidelines in DC schools, and I'm coming to student representative Ting. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so the TLDR is that if you remember, it's so a student made a bunch of cultural club guidelines, and we're not going to endorse this specific resource that she made, but we do want to generally support students sharing resources, specifically facilitating. I'm in Banneker, and I want to help the students at school that will build their culture club because I have experience. And so this is a ceremonial resolution that was voted out at the SBOE committee, and all it does is say, and the resolve clauses are, the first clause is it's important for students to have access to culture clubs. The second clause is saying that guidebooks and resources are good, and schools should and encourages schools to promote guidebooks to help their students create culture clubs. And the final resolve clause basically says the same thing.
Good.
I just want to thank you. You did an amazing job on this, and to thank you to the young lady who brought this forward. It is a great resource for students that are looking to start those clubs up, and I've encouraged her she'll be back next year, hopefully on SAC. Maybe she'll be applying to be a student rep, we'll see. But this is just such a great resolution, and I'll be missing you because you've moved, I think, a record number, and it will be a hard number to top for any student rep. So thank you for working with me in the SEC, SBEE, but I just want to give you the credit for it because you're the one who got this done, not me, and it was incredible. So thank you.
Yeah, all right. Any other discussion? All right.
I guess move it to.
Yeah, but so in general, CRs don't have the same.
Oh yeah, they don't have
as
to actually.
SRs.
Yeah.
So like, for example, the SRs recognizing our outgoing student reps. We haven't written those yet, but we know they will be on the agenda, so they have to be voted to be placed on the agenda. But we also don't normally read them until we get to the meeting. Just in case wonderful members have things you want to add about our student members. So there's that.
So I appreciate that.
So you may not see them, but you don't necessarily have to defend them with the same level of, because it's ceremonial, it's not like a policy decision per se.
So thank you so much. So with that,
Do we vote or do we?
yes, you have to vote. Yeah, oh, keep it on.
Hold it in block, because at the meeting, they will be in the consent agenda.
The,
There's a reason for recess. Which is why.
would like to,
Yes.
okay, so I'm just, currently, I am entertaining a motion for CR 25-3 for supporting culture club guidelines in DC schools. Entertain a motion, so moved by Vice President Williams, can I get a second?
Second.
It's been properly second by Johnson Law, Ward 8, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, any nays? Abstention, carried unanimously. All right, next, coming to you, Representative Johnson Law. SR 25-4, recognizing the organizers of Recess at the Capitol. Congratulations, you got the floor.
Thank you. There is, said SR, it's CR.
CR, I'm sorry, I apologize, CR 25-4.
I would like to talk about this now, no offense, so we don't have to do this at the public meeting. Organizers of this fabulous event, are coming to our public meeting. I know we have a lot on the agenda. And so I am requesting that we vote to put this at the top before the expert panel. So that way, because we also have children coming. And so I know the expert panel, that takes a good hour. I'm thinking of children and their capacity, and there are a lot of folks who have other things to do that day, but I want to make sure that they get their a copy of it. I talked to Jen about this. Jen said, make sure they get their copy, but if we could, I'm asking, can we put this after Dr. Mitchell to do this, so that way they can get their picture and get their copies?
That is duly noted. We have done this in the past, because we've had families come, want to take pictures. After we take a motion, I know we'll work with staff to make sure that as we put the, guidelines for our region, everything like that, to make sure that we move it up, so that's not a problem. We've done it before.
I didn't want to take up time at the public meeting to do this.
All right, so I appreciate that, and we will take care of that. Is there any other discussion on this, ceremonial resolution? Seeing none, I will take a motion for CR 25-4, recognizing the organizers of Recess at the Capitol. A motion. So moved by Representative Johnson Law, seconded by Vice President Williams. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays?
Aye.
Any nays? Any abstentions? Carried unanimously. All right.
Thanks, guys.
Now, as I was told, I can carry the particular ones in a block.
Well, but they haven't been written. So you
Because
don't
they
have to
have not
ask.
been written, I have drafts for one thing, kind of draft, yeah.
You wanna
But there
add-
may be things that people want to add to these, so we're going to take these in block, and the blocks that I am taking is CR 25-5, recognizing 24-25 student representative Khalid Barnes. CR 25-6, recognizing 24-25 student representative Anna Myers. CR 25-7, recognizing 2024-2025 representative Brian Ting. Is there any discussion at this particular time? Not that we have anything in our hands right now, is there any discussion?
My discussion is, all edits for all CRs and all legislation for the public agenda each Jan. By Wednesday, so that we can get everything ready to post by Friday. She will send out, well, not she, someone will send out the notes with links to all of the draft versions of these. If you have comments, edits, please go in and make them, so that we can get everything and ready for the posting by next Friday, yeah.
Send all edits in by this Friday.
By Wednesday of next,
Wednesday next week.
so that we can then prepare for posting.
I have a request. Typically, these are placed in consent agenda. I would like them placed in non-consent agenda, so that you have to read each one. And this is the tradition.
That is what we always do. We always take them out of the consent agenda and we always require.
Duly noted, Representative Boulay, thank you very much. All right, any other discussion? Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to let you all know, and I know Representative Barnes is here, but like, I just really appreciate all the work that you all have done. I mean, and of course with Dr. Fleischer, but you all have just been so amazing and so involved, and I'm just I'm sure we all are, but I'm just like really proud of you guys. I'm gonna miss y'all. No, we'll have others, but I'm just like really proud of you. Keep that same energy in college. Okay.
And I will express mine, at this time on the dais, but at this particular point, when I'm going to do of those three that I just, serve on resolutions that, and numbers that I just read, I will entertain a motion for those three.
So
So moved by Representative Johnson Law, it is seconded by Representative Goulet, three, all in favor? Aye. Any nays? I hope it would never be. Any abstention? Thank you, that motion carried unanimously. Now we are coming to the new business of the added items, and the first added item was a September board retreat.
Yes, so we discussed earlier this year that we would circle back to retreat in September. I have found us an ideal location, that is free of cost. We just need dates, and time. So I'm just trying to let you all know that in the follow-up email that goes out tomorrow, there will be a link for you to vote. And the dates you will vote on are, one, how long you want this retreat to be? Is it like just one day? Is it a day and a half? You all should think about that, think about what you want to cover, and when in September you would like it. The location is available on whenever we need it, but so Saturdays are not prohibited, during the week it's not prohibited, but those will be the options that are in the survey, and we want to hear from you. So that we can lock this in sooner rather than later. And so that the board leadership can work with you all members to decide your agenda. Because the staff will not be at this time. We need all board members to come up with your agenda. We will be hiring an outside facilitator. So we are up in the air so that you all can be fully connected to the outcome of the retreat.
Maybe we put dates we cannot attend in there, is there like a function?
I will add that to it.
Other discussions, comments, questions?
thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Seeing none. Right, it was just a discussion, nothing moved. So, now, we will come to our last item in new business, which is a discussion around, quality public education is a civil right, which is me. I'll wait till the very end. I come to this, I will say a little frustrated because, this is something, a subject matter that has literally at this particular point, since we passed May, has gone on for 8 years. Just had a panel. It has had a discussion. There has been, a memo, which was received a certain type of way, and there was a draft resolution that has been with both internal and external folks for quite some time. There has been suggestions to make sure that it goes to a committee, which has been referred to. Once it was referred to the committee, which was 2 months ago, I believe, at this particular time, I recently received, and I appreciate from the committee, the notes that were provided. I attended their meeting, as I said, last week, just to get an understanding and to also update on community engagement. I hear the committee very well, and I want to be respectful to the committee, for providing me input, especially I want to say, Representative Henderson, I truly, truly appreciate all the comments that you provided. They were deep, they were thought-provoking, and I tried to make sure that I answered each one. And I believe you have one follow-up question to that, or a comment, so to speak, but I wanted to make sure that I followed up in a timely manner. And as we talk about timely manner, I had come to this meeting wanting to make sure that from the things that I did receive, and I heard that there wanted to be some more like around community engagement. And so what has also happened as I went out to other community groups, I actually sat down with one of the individuals who had a lot to say about this particular resolution. The executive director of PAY, by Martin Kenobi, and we had a great conversation. She has since agreed to host a convening, you want to call it a convening, around this particular subject matter where she would host it, but we would invite all individuals who have actually had something to say about this. She would have hosted at their home building. She even offered to provide food for that particular meeting. I am very receptive to that because again, I want to make sure that we are transparent, that people understand, even though I feel everybody has had this for quite some time and they've had the opportunity to chime in on it. Again, the most concern in this particular resolution has come from Representative Henderson. It's quite comprehensive in his thought process and everything like that. I've had conversations with Representative Best and Johnson Law concerning this, just to make sure, reached out to Representative Thompson to talk about exactly what she wanted to see as far as community engagement and get a better understanding of that. So I had come here wanting to understand why it could not be on the public meeting for the next time. I've since talked to our director. She's given me some directives on that, so I truly appreciate the director as far as SPs and also what it says in our bylaws. At this particular time, because I've had some communications since we've been here doing our break with Representative Best, I want to let you chime in, sir.
Oh, as far as like,
Yeah.
what are my thoughts?
Yeah.
No, so, okay, let me pull it up. So I read through all of, Henderson, Representative Henderson's, remarks. And, sorry, I wasn't prepared to speak right now. But I did go through all of, Representative Henderson's remarks. I've also, kind of worked with, Dr. Patterson or President Patterson to, kind of like redraft, the resolution, as well as, create a separate version, or a separate, resolution. Thank you, yeah. There we go. That's why you're right there. All right, a second, resolution, that would also, create a, city, yeah, a commission on, a commission that would address some of the accountability concerns or like, saying that instead of it, people, when they have issues or complaints, instead of them going, filing lawsuits, they would go to that commission that would be, selected or appointed, where there would be, member of OSCE, a member of DCPS, a parent, student, something that was very, equitable. Once again, they're not telling people what to do, but they are providing those, recommendations based off of what they find. And so, we do have like like a one pager, which will like speak on like what all of this is. You all will receive that later. And it's just like as an opportunity to, kind of give that feedback. And it explains a little more of that information. I can share it with the group, a little later. Yeah, yeah, that's fine.
President Patterson, is that?
Oh, what's that?
Just share it a little
I'm
bit.
very open. I'm very open.
I think you're about to say something, go ahead. I
No,
interrupted you, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna move to the next person, but we're asking the question, am I?
Well, I just wanted to kind of piggyback off of Representative Ben's.
Representative Thompson, I see you in the queue, so I will get there in just a second, ma'am.
Thank you, President Patterson. So like Representative Best said, it's a two-part approach, right? So as members of the board, we want to deliver a clear message about educational equity. I know that's would call it a buzzword right now as we're in the district, but we need to let families know, like this was derived out of making sure that families know that we believe in them and that we want to make sure that they have a right to an equitable education, that they have high quality education. And so it's just like a bold statement of rights, and a trusted structure to implement those rights. So it, as Representative Best said, it's been revised, taking into account Representative Henderson and all of his comments. And basically it's just kind of framing the right as like, it's systemic and enforceable, but it does limit, there was a concern about legal action to the system, especially with certain things in regards to like, like a school with funding structures and things like that. but to provide equitable relief, but it excludes the monetary damages. It definitely clarifies that it has no, private right of action. So basically, like, this is not a voucher thing, y'all. That's not, that's.
A voucher or ESA.
That's not in there. And basically we are centering, community. And then with the commission, it's basically creating a diverse community informed commission that basically kind of defines and also monitors like what a high quality education is. So think of this as kind of like a mini boundary study commission that is kind of looking at like how things are happening. So the boundary study, as Representative Henderson said before, when we looked at a high quality education, we convened for over a year. But as people have said, okay, now that the boundary study's done, okay, who's following up with these things? Like what are, what's actually happening? And so this is just a way to kind of like monitor and to also advocate. And then again, we can represent the best citizen all of that information, but I hope that was helpful in responses to what the committee has to say.
There you go. Well, I look forward to that, receiving that. Representative Thompson, please.
I'm sorry, I'm a bit, I think I may have missed something. Is there a reason we are discussing this here tonight? Given it's still in the committee?
Yes, because I put on the new business to have a discussion about it.
Maybe I should frame my question differently. Why did you place this on new business? Like, what is our hope? Is our hope that we take this feedback back into the committee? I could imagine that would be helpful. Is there something else?
There actually, when I asked to put this on here prior to that, there was a thought process of how, as I expressed in the meeting, after, listening to the committee, there was a frustration. So I wanted to talk more about if there was a possibility of out of committee, in some other way. And I've since talked to Director Butler, and he may be your representative. And so I'm not entertaining that, but I did want to make sure that we had the conversation. So that's why. Representative, I want to give Representative
That's a
Thompson.
response to Representative.
That was Representative.
So Representative Thompson also, I was talking with, because I know it is in committee. I was talking with Representative Best, and we were just trying to figure out like if we maybe have a conversation to the broader group about maybe some of the changes that we made, that it could be more helpful and informed as we talk about this in committee as well, to making sure that we include other perspectives because this affects everybody. And so as we were kind of changing some things around, we just didn't want to change them with like the two of us. And then we talked to, I'm sorry, not Dr. Patterson, but President Patterson about it. But it's like we also, don't tell the whole group about it. That to better inform, I'm looking at Representative Henderson to inform what we're doing in the group. So it was also an idea that we had too. Is that out of order?
No, that's not out of order. But I believe Representative Henderson, were you next? Representative Boulay.
Well, I hope what we do is we take, I think this interesting proposal that you put forward, maybe we refer that, if this president decides to committee and then kind of be considered holistically with what's there. For me, on this issue, I have been very vocal about kindergarten being essential, that every student has a right to kindergarten. So for me, I do believe it's a civil right that every student should have a quality education in DC. I'd be hypocritical to say otherwise if I've been, screaming to anyone who will listen about making sure every kid gets to go to kindergarten. So I'm supportive of this. I like what you're proposing on this. If we go to, eventually to legislation, I mean, what my preference would be though on the civil right aspect of this is to try to focus on what really constitutes like a high quality education, what's a civil right versus trying to focus on remedies if we don't meet it. Because that to me seems like step 2 of it's statutory. And I know a lot of people, I think what you're trying to get ahead of with that is some of the concern that this is going to invite litigation. And for me on that, I'm not worried about that because we're doing a resolution, a statement of principle that this is a civil right. Here's what that means. So I feel like
I think this is a good discussion to have because it might defend against some of the potential criticism that this is gonna open us up to, like an array of litigation. Because what you're showing is there's a solution there if we do go to legislation at some future date. And I know I've spoken with you, I'm comfortable with the bill right now, but certainly not a resolution. Where we make a statement of principles, right, that's right, so like a bill or legislation, I don't want to do at this point with Congress. Potentially misconstruing it. But, with this, I commend what you're doing, but I would like to stick to for the resolution. Specifically talking about what constitutes civil right, and this will be good to have in our back pocket if someone comes in and says. The ultimate goal here is vouchers, the ultimate goal here is litigation. We can say clearly it's not, because if we ever do go to the next stage on this, we have a positive solution that will prevent that. So thank you for raising this, Representative Best, and look forward to see what the committee produces on it.
Yeah, and just for everyone, I do have to step out right now, but I did just send a copy of the draft. So you all would see like the approach. Yeah, where we are right now.
Again, I appreciate, those that provided feedback, and again, as I told, co-chair, Henderson, is that, this is not something that we're trying to push for legislation at a particular time. We do understand that the succinct and very precarious situation that we are not a state, that we are, a district, and that we have a home rule. Anytime you open that up, it opens it up to unintended consequences. So we heard community members, as I've engaged them, I've engaged a lot of our nonprofits, also our analytical groups, whether that be the Policy Center, the DC Policy Center, yes, and other individuals. So I'm very sensitive to that and prepared to loud and clear. And so I want people to know that that's not the goal of this. I know, as we talked about, co-chair Henderson, is that it was in the resolution, but that I answered in your note response to you that was no longer the goal of this. I think it can now be replaced with what you guys have offered in this particular sense, which makes it, I think, more amenable for a lot of groups who have those concerns about us opening up a precarious situation it would put us in. So I just wanted to have that discussion at this particular time. I won't be trying to ask for any other type of way, but I've talked with Vice President Williams as well. So I just wanted to make sure we had a discussion on that, where I was as the proposer of this particular resolution. Also just want to get on record this working meeting of what some of my thoughts were, what some of my frustrations were. I appreciate everybody in this particular conversation. If there are any last words?
I would say, as the committee is going back and revising. But my main concern would be if we're creating another mission or task, or you do not, or at least like, you have zero capacity for more than one long task force at a time. And so to think about what are other alternatives you all can suggest, and then is this mission something that reports to the state? Like, are they just sort of what because I've heard, this is my first time hearing about it, just like when you all are in committee, because I'm not in the committee, but just think about, so like, is it reporting to us? Like, who is convening these individuals?
So.
Right.
President McMahon.
Yes.
Director, to answer your question, this is just literally us thinking through, like, as we were in committee and taking back what Representative Thompson said, and then looking through what Representative Henderson said. One, for us, can these different edits, can we put this into the committee, number one? Two, it doesn't necessarily like have to be like a commission, that was just something we were thinking through. I know the board has just done like different events, like, looking at Alistair, you had something last year with the literacy, where it had all of the, with like this mixer and of different folks and.
Well, it wasn't, and actually, should be very clear, it wasn't an Alistair thing, it was something Alistair brought to the entire board voted. And then and then it became the work of the staff to execute that, so it wasn't like he brought it by himself, but it had, they voted under. Yeah, it did go through.
Okay.
And all the things, and then it was voted on, but it just wasn't him.
Okay, I'm thinking of the model of that and what you're trying to work on to keep this, right, to kind of keep this going, even if this is something that the board does on a yearly basis, like we just use commission because honestly, we just really didn't have a word. It's a placeholder. But even if it is like a yearly roundtable, because I'm thinking about staffing and things of that nature, like a yearly roundtable that the board sponsors to say, we want to hear about a high quality education. Again, going back to the boundary study example, they do that every like 10 years. We don't come back to see what's really like happening. So this was just an idea to be able for the board to have some type of roundtable on this, maybe yearly, not a commission, if we just, that's a placeholder now. But it's something to continue this conversation as we are talking about a high quality education for all students in the district.
And I want to come
Is that
back.
helpful?
It is very helpful.
Well, I have read, I just know, but.
Yes. So we just did all of this. So this is like new. I want everyone, that's why it's under new business. All of this is like very, very new within literally the past.
But it's not, 'cause
Well, not-
it's still committee.
Oh,
Still in
yeah,
committee.
sorry, I'm sorry,
Still-
not new, but new revisions
Yes.
based on the feedback that we got in committee, and I worked with Representative Best to figure out, okay, like how can we be solution oriented to move it forward based on what the co-chairs have based on their feedback, and also based on the feedback of the board at first and also the public as well.
Appreciate that. And I'm gonna come back to Representative Thompson, co-chair.
Director Butler, just to be clear, this was not presented in the committee. And so this is the first time that Representative Henderson and I are seeing this. So I know you don't attend our committee meetings, but I know you do get report outs from the staff, and that's also why this was not covered in our committee report. And so it is, ideally, should have not been in new business at the working session, because it's not technically before the board in the same way, which I think is causing you some confusion. But I am looking forward to having this conversation in our committee meeting, and appreciate the time and effort that Representative Best and Johnson Law have put in to proposing some solutions to move this forward. And so I think that's why you're a bit confused as far as saying, like, I don't attend your committee meetings. This was not discussed in our committee meeting.
We appreciate that. And one last one, Representative Johnson, also to our committee member.
Thank you. Representative Thompson, thank you for your remarks. We just wanted to, this was an idea. And so that's why it was not in committee. Brandon and I were just, this was something that Representative Best and I were working on. We have not presented this to committee yet. I know President Patterson had a concern about the civil rights. And so this was just an idea that we had to get feedback on to inform us as a committee. Like, I know when we have different discussions, it's really nice to get perspective. And so I just wanted to get perspective just from the board to be able to inform all of us and to inform our co-chairs, you know, about the idea that we had. I just didn't want to we didn't want to bring this idea to the committee, and the board is just like, well, why would you do that? That doesn't work. You know what I mean? So it was just an idea.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Representative Johnson Law. But I was just answering Executive Director's question about where there was some confusion. So thank you.
Thank you, Representative Thompson. Last
point. So my understanding of this is it's similar to what Representative Williams raised, where he raised an issue, you know, this was the case on the homelessness issue. You wanted it on the new business agenda as an issue, so then that issue could be referred to committee after discussion. Well, this new issue, so like we discuss it here, it could be referred to committee, and then, as we often do, refer issues to committee to then take up the issue after a working session. So I think that's how I'm thinking of it, is an issue discussed here on the agenda, referred to committee so the committee can consider it. Is that your understanding?
That is my understanding. Okay. And what I will say in closing this discussion, so that we can all adjourn in the next few minutes, is that I truly appreciate, as proposed of this, those who have been very transparent and have been very responsive as we've navigated this particular issue. Truly appreciate the words, suggestions as we've navigated this. So thank you very much. With that being said, I want to thank all the members for your time and engagement tonight. Members of the public can visit SBOE.dc.gov to learn how to submit and present testimony at upcoming public meetings. All public witnesses must submit a written copy of their testimony to our staff for the public record. Again, we need to submit it, for those who are listening in, we need it for our records. The topic of our expert panel this month is high school diploma and certificate options for students with disability. Again, congratulations, Representative Council Law. I know that is very near and dear to you. Members voted on this topic at the May working session. Seeing no further business before the state board, I would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
So I have heard a motion from Representative Johnson Law. It is seconded by Student Representative King. All in favor?
Aye.
Any nays?